My dog wants water.
Hey, everybody. Do you remember when we used to do podcasts? Like in April and probably May? Who is that? I haven't heard that voice in a long time. Oh, it's... yeah, this is a professional quality thing. It's a roll of toilet paper. Oh, and Shane's head. Hey, Shane, how's it going?
Hey, it's good. I'm really good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm also hungry. So, apologies for disgusting eating noises.
It's okay, Shane. We've never been a professional podcasting scenario.
What?
Professionals.
Back when I was here, we were all business all the time.
Oh yeah, dude. Talking about games. I think one of our early ones said we were really excited about Battlefront because it looked like it was going to be a good game. Lucky for you guys. Yeah. To be fair, I think that everything we said was legit because I don't think any of us were stupid enough to say that's definitely going to be a good game. I'm going to 100% buy that when it comes out. I may have said those things. I don't mean them. I got smarter in the meantime. But hey, everybody, we're not going to talk about video games today, probably. Actually, we could talk about anything. This is Drinks and Discussions. That's why I have a beer. And that's why Shane also
I've got
has a beer. He's got a fancier beer because he's a little bit more pretentious than I am.
Hey, this actually legitimately came from Belgium, okay? And if I'm going to play up my hipster cred, I'll have you know that I brought this on a plane from Belgium myself. So...
Yeah, your beard's gotten longer, so
it has.
You're turning into a full hippie, dude.
Yeah, actually, I want to show you something.
Hit me with it.
Before we get into the serious discussion, because I got it from my in-laws. So for the record, I am a vegetarian, not a vegan.
I know. I know the difference.
So, but I pulled open my stocking, and what did I find inside?
Vegan Life.
Vegan Life magazine. Yeah, and you know, there's this kind of misconception out there that people who are vegan are for some reason like pretentious sounding or maybe like a little holier than thou. I just want to show you one of the first. There's a few things that caught my eye. I'm not going to go into great detail here. I know that everyone here is interested in the vegan life, but
all I know about it is that you can get superpowers because that's what happened in Scott Pilgrim. So I'm pretty sure that holds legit.
Yeah, and I mean, so that's a reason to consider switching to full veganism. So I'm thinking about that, but just like if you thought that vegans were, you know, somehow super righteous and, you know, always willing to be like kind of a dick to talk to people about stuff, two things. First off, this advertisement from the back, I'm a milk intolerant chocoholic. So what? So what's happening here in this piece of art is this man is demonstrating just how much he doesn't give a fuck about your sensibilities and about your, you know, being mainstream with your eating of meat. No. He's going above and beyond because he truly believes that it's okay to like products that are generally based on milk, but without milk in them. And he's going to tell you all about it in a totally non-self-satisfied, smug way. That's what this is, and I found it beautiful. Now, moving on to the front, no thanks, I'm vegan, by the fat gay vegan. And I thought to myself, wow, that's unnecessary. And firstly, how do you get fat if you're a vegan? And also, what does being gay have to do with anything? But I found out that it was actually a very insightful article because I decided to have a look in here.
Please tell me that fat gay vegan was like a pseudonym or something that like, oh no, this is what I always go by in these things, not like... everyone needs to know these descriptors. Like, if it's supposed to be like a pseudonym, I'll allow it because whatever. Like, if you want to use it,
I'm pretty sure that's not his legal birth name.
No, but like, I didn't think it was on his birth certificate. But like, same way that I like, this like when gamers go by titles that they hold. Like, if it's like, if he always writes as like that as a pseudonym, we're gonna allow.
What he looks like. So he might be fat. It's hard to tell. I mean, he's got a bit of a chin going there, like a second one, but This is another piece of art, which I just what really strikes me in this one. So yeah, he's wearing the toque, which you know is made out of hemp. He's got the plaid shirt with some sort of pocket protector, I think.
I think it's a kerchief.
It's a what?
I think it's
a
kerchief.
Oh my god. Okay, yeah, because he put away his fedora because it's cold out. Anyways, what I like though, just that facial expression. You know, it just says to everybody, I'm better than you. And you should have aspire to be as good as I am. And, I'm just like, you know what? No, that can't be what this is about, because surely people who are vegan aren't actually like this. I'm just going to quote a few paragraphs here.
Oh yeah, hit me with it, dude. Drop some knowledge.
Yeah, okay. We've all been there. We've all been there. That awkward moment when you're out with friends, work colleagues, family members, or even people you don't know all too well, and somebody offers you something to eat or drink that isn't vegan. There can be an uncomfortable silence, and you can often feel a huge desire to not want to offend people or come across as a difficult vegan. Well, I'm here to tell you it's okay to say no to non-vegan offerings with a friendly confidence. Actually, it's more than just okay. Learning to love saying, I'm vegan, gives you confidence in your beliefs, affords people a super quick insight into the type of person you are, i.e. kind, in brackets, exclamation mark, and acts as a form of outreach to help spread your compassionate message of caring for animals.
Okay, so is this magazine just like, I'm gonna circle jerk how great I am, everybody?
It's insane. Like everything down to how to garden without destroying the earth. Oh no, here we go. Cleaning products that don't cost the earth. A bunch of things about online vegan supermarkets, microwavable crisps. What is it? Anyways, there's just a bunch of junk here, which is funny because it's vegan. Everyone eats clean on vegan, but I love the fact that this world exists. And it's not because I particularly want to be a part of it, but because you have people like Trump on one side, right? And we all know that he provides an infinite amount of comedic material, and also more than a little bit of terror. But then there's these people.
Shane, he has the biggest buttons. Opposite. He has the biggest buttons, okay? Nobody has bigger nuclear buttons than he does. So just fucking maybe chill out a little bit. His button's so big that if he nukes your house, he might get mine too. So like maybe just take it down a notch, okay?
The most terrifying part of that is all I can imagine is him sitting in the White House, and they've actually taken out the standard desk that the president sit behind, and they've just put this giant metal contraption with a huge glass cover over a massive red button. It's like the size of a basketball. And every once in a while, he like flips open the glass container, and he just like stares at it, and he's like, "Should I?" And that's the two most terrifying words when you add a question mark and you attribute them to Trump that I can possibly imagine. So I digress. Anyways, so yeah, this was my Christmas, my first Christmas ever without meat, and it was delicious because I had so much chocolate. I get how a vegan could be fat. Nice segue back. Anyways,
yeah, nicely done, dude. Hey, it's really nice that your in-laws are really in tune with your with what you're interested in. So much that they totally thought that vegan and vegetarian were the same thing. Although we should remark that that's not necessarily only a old person problem, because fuck, dude, I thought you were vegan, but it's not because I don't know the difference. It's because you and I hadn't spoken in a bit, and Ryan said, "Hey, do you know that Shane's vegan now?" And I was like, Ryan's a reasonable human being who probably knows the difference. I was not correct about that thought, because apparently Ryan had not done his homework.
It's fine. My in our Discord chat for school, which is not moderated by me, my name has been changed to Veganator, so Ryan's not the only one.
Oh yeah,
for what it's worth. Anyways, it's fine. I don't care either way. As long as you don't lump me in with the vegan life people, I'm cool.
Yeah. Well, you don't lump me in with the vegan life people, and or I won't lump you with vegan life people if you don't lump me in with dumb people don't deserve their opinions to be heard. Which is a great segue to our main topic of the night, maybe our only topic of the night. We're not sure yet, but I'm going to give a little bit of context to that statement. So basically, everybody, Ryan and I had an argument a while ago, like for funsies, and it eventually came down to the equality of opinion, because I had a point that had cited expert sources and something. I don't remember the context exactly. This was actually a few months ago now. And he said, yeah, but like if the dumb people want to believe this, then they can believe that. And I said, yeah, but I'm not going to take their opinion over somebody else's. He goes, why not? Their opinion is just as valid as anybody else's. And I took umbrage with that statement. And then we found that impasse. He was of the opinion that all opinions have equal merit. I was of the opinion that was not the case. And when he recited my opinion several months later, with obviously this wasn't like we had like recording reference material to go back to. This was just like an offhand conversation. He recited it back to Shane and Dane of Pajodcast, and they did not agree with the retelling of my stance, because Ryan's retelling of my stance said that dumb people don't deserve to have their opinions be heard or considered. So I can't believe Shane didn't agree with that statement, but. So Shane, I don't want to speak for you, but do you think that dumb people might, in some cases, deserve to have their opinions be heard and considered?
I believe that. I think my exact response was essentially to Ryan's retelling of it was
yeah.
And once again, it's been a few weeks, so I don't know that that's exactly how he said it. And he made
but also, like, I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. He didn't remember exactly what I said, because I was like, it was months before, and it's not like he could like go back and refresh himself. Like, he was going offhand on comments that made, and this was like the end of a lengthy discussion. But you can see how the telephone game may have gotten a little bit disconnected in the retelling.
The basic response, as I remember it, was basically, no, that's incorrect. They're also people, and therefore they deserve to have an opinion, and it deserves to be considered seriously by people who are looking to make a decision. That was the gist of how I responded. So yeah, in short,
reasonable.
Well,
seems pretty reasonable on your part. I can't believe that you disagreed with what I said, Shane. How dare you?
I know. I know. Well, if you wouldn't have made such an unreasonable blanket assertion, then it would.
You're right. You know what? That was my fault for making that unreasonable blanket assertion. So do you want to know what I actually said? What my actual viewpoint was? Okay. So I don't think that all opinions have equal merit. And the example I cited with Ryan at the time was that if my mom gives me medical advice, I don't think that has equal merit to a doctor. If you're an expert in a subject, if you have a certain amount of knowledge in a subject, your opinion matters more than some random who just says things. If you can back up your opinion with, data or research, and someone else is like, well, I just feel like that because I feel like that opinion doesn't matter as much. And I think what I probably said with they don't deserve to be heard or considered is, I don't want to hear them or consider them because I don't care what they say, because they're dumb. Which is my opinion. I don't really feel the need to listen to every dumb opinion that somebody has. I'll just shut them down. I'll be pretty condescending with it, where I'll just really quickly just point out what's really stupid and make them feel dumb, which you could say is narcissistic, which would absolutely be true. You could say it's rude, which is definitely true. You could say it's unnecessary, which you could probably argue, but I'm kind of a dick sometimes. But I don't think that all opinions have equal merit, as in, if it's not like it's a vote, like we're doing everything by referendum, where, if 20 doctors are in a room and they say, like, this is a really bad thing, and 80 random idiots in a room say this is a really good thing, I'm going to listen to the 20 doctors if it's a medical thing. If 12 economists tell me that something is going to, like, that we're going to see market trends go this way, and 16 people's dads say it's going to go in a different direction, and I'll just okay. Shane dropped his microphone, I believe. If 16 of someone's dads are like, no, but this one time I saw something that was kind of like it, but not really, and this is what happened, so therefore this would happen. I'm gonna listen to the people who have some sort of a background in it. And the same way that if somebody who is trustworthy tells me something, and somebody who kind of makes shit up a lot or is intellectually dishonest tells me another thing, I'm more likely to originally probably believe the first person than the second. Also go in and do my own research afterwards, but I don't hold everyone's opinion at equal value. I take what I know about those people, their disposition, their understanding of subjects, their levels of knowledge, their philosophical beliefs, and I'll weigh those against the things that they're saying. So does that sound like a little bit more reasonable than dumb people don't deserve their opinions to be heard?
Yeah, I think that gives a more a simpler place to start from, because I think that if we have any disagreements, they are going to be a little bit less far-reaching
than something that was like completely fantastic like that. Yeah. So yeah. I know I kind of just threw a lot at you. Is there any part of that you disagreed with, or that you want to start with?
I think the most important thing is to kind of make sure that we're talking about the same things when we use certain words. So what I mean
Yes.
by that is,
Please do.
So using the words that their opinions don't have merit. Now, I think I understand
They don't have
merit.
equal merit. Yeah.
So there's two ways of looking at that for me. So on one hand, I think that if you're talking about merit as in words that you would use to guide your decisions, and that random Bob or like I was going to use a famous person. I'm going to try and just use generic Joes here. Generic Joe who works out on the rigs and who watches Fox News and InfoWars all the time decides that global warming is a hoax for whatever reason, lizard people or money or whatever, or crooked Hillary, versus even just one climate scientist who has a record of going to a school in which climate science is taught, preferably an accredited one, like a well-known university, and that well-known or that climate scientist, even if he's not well-known, says, "I think climate change is real." My personal response would be, firstly, I need a bigger sample size, probably to say if that's such a broad statement, is true. But if I just had those two opinions to go off, I'd be more likely to agree with the climate scientist, just on the basis of the fact that I think his opinions come from a place of much more rigorous testing in general. They should, anyways, unless he's just a dogmatic, mainline thinker or something, and he just adopted those beliefs because that's what everybody else says. So going into more detail as to where they got their information from would be useful, but if I don't know anything else about them and I can't get any more information from them, I would tend to agree with the person who has the formal education plus ideally some sort of experience. Maybe he did some actual measuring himself or something, whatever. So from that perspective, I think that absolutely the uninformed opinion has less merit, if you want to call it that, than an informed opinion. On the other hand, two human beings that have an opinion, regardless of their background, in my mind, have merit that is equal on the grounds that they're both human. In the sense that I may not decide to go with Random Joe's opinion, but I respect his right to have his opinion heard, which is not necessarily, maybe right is too strong of a word, but I respect I respect that his opinion should be heard. How can I say this? I respect the fact that he has an opinion and he's interested in having it heard, even if I don't necessarily want it to be on the same heard, let's say on some sort of national news somewhere, versus that single climate scientist. I'd rather have the climate scientist, and I will add as well that if a Random Joe also happens to have a degree in climatology and he's done a studies himself, I do want him to have a voice as well. And once again, assuming that there wasn't climate change specifically, for example, assuming there wasn't overwhelming evidence, there wasn't the huge scientific consensus that I think most people agree it is, and shouldn't really have to agree because it is the crushing weight of numbers, but I digress. Assuming that it was just one-on-one, I don't care that they have dissenting opinions. In fact, I appreciate the fact that they have dissenting opinions because I think that the potential for science and for humanity to gain more knowledge about the natural world, which, by the way, doesn't give a shit about anyone's opinions, I think that is very good. And so to have equal representation of both sides, regardless of where they came from, as long as they have, how can I say this? Okay, I guess just to get back to my first point before I continue on with this train of thought, I think that merit based on the fact that they're both human beings, yes, they both deserve to have an opinion. Merit as far as which one I'm going to use to guide my life and my decisions and what I believe is, especially even if I know the guy, even if I know Random Joe, if Random Joe doesn't have a degree in climatology and can't explain to me why he thinks something like global warming isn't real or climate change isn't real, if he can't do that, then he's not going to convince me personally. And in that sense, their opinion will have less merit on anything to do with the natural world. Now, if you start talking about something that's a little bit more of a soft science, and I know that that's a word that a lot of people will or a combination words a lot of people hate, but something that's a little bit more subjective. Like we start talking a little bit maybe more about psychology, for example.
Yeah,
which
economics, any of the ones that
economics,
you have
yes.
a definitive right or wrong answer. You can say soft science. I'm not going to get upset with that, but yeah.
Yeah. In that case, I think that I still believe the same fundamental principles that someone who can explain with more, in my mind, it's scientific vigor, really, is what it is how have you studied this? Even if it's just studying other people's studies and coming to a conclusion, that's a very valid way of gathering data that you can't get yourself. But if you come to me with evidence of your opinion, and it seems to be backed empirically somehow, and the evidence to me seems stronger than the other guy who has an accepted way of thinking, but the evidence seems to be weaker, then I'm probably going to go with the guy who's outside of the mainstream, even though that may be that may not be the easiest thing to think about, or sorry, the easiest opinion to have, because the average person is going to be like, no, that's stupid. I mean, let's say, for example, that communism was actually a much more efficient way, and we now have systems to do it where we can remove the human element, so it's entirely efficient. Everyone gets everything they need, and everyone's actually happier, demonstrably. And maybe there was a study done somewhere, and it showed that everybody was happy.
Basically.
The Star Trek feature. There you go. But the general economic theory is even about things like universal basic income. The average person on the street, and maybe even some probably more right-leaning, but maybe some on the left too, economists will say that basic economic theory says that if everybody has everything provided for them, they're not going to want to work. It's just a question of incentives. If they have enough money to eat and to have a roof over their heads and whatnot, then why would they ever want to work? Well, the studies that have been conducted about UBI have suggested that on average, there are some people that will stay home, and those tend to be young mothers to finish and people who are finishing their education, like high school at the time, which was in the 80s in Manitoba. But the average person, the other people, will continue to work as many hours. They'll go to the hospital less often because they're less stressed, and they'll be more likely to start their own business because they know that worst case scenario, they are not going to lose their house, or not going to be able to eat, or they're still going to be able to feed their family. So I would go ahead and accept that based on the fact that there's really good evidence, even though it's been tried on a small scale, there's really good evidence to support that it's worth a try, Mm-hmm. So getting back to the question of merit, I think that no matter how you slice it, there are some people whose opinions are probably worth listening to more on the basis of the fact that they can support them better. And I don't believe that it has anything to do, because I'm making a straw man. I'm just going to say this right now. This is a straw man, but I have heard the argument before that, like, for climate change especially, you're just going with, you're a sheeple, wake up, etc., because you're just going with what the news media is telling you, the fake news and all of that. And I think that is an invalid argument as long as you understand why you've come up with that opinion. So in my understanding, and once again, not as a climate scientist myself, all the evidence that I've heard from scientists who do have degrees in climatology all over the world, on average, say that climate change is happening. And they have many, many years of data to back it up. Now, not on the thousands and thousands of years that the other side of the argument would argue is required to really know if it's climate change or not. But I think that given what we know, and given the limitations to our instrumentation, which is that we've only had accurate temperature reporting for the last 150 years or whatever, we can say with some degree of confidence, plus a lot of other indicators, like I believe something to do with trees in England, and it's not coming to the top of my head right now. I'm not an expert, once again, but everything that I have read for suggesting that climate change is real from reputable scientists has well overcome the barrier of skepticism for me. Or sorry, not overcome the barrier of skepticism, but overcome the other side of the argument, I guess, that it's not human impacted, that we had nothing to do with it, because most people now will not argue that there isn't some sort of a climatic shift occurring. And the days that we had here in Canada not too long ago, where it was colder in many places, almost everywhere, than in most of Canada, than it was in the North Pole, which was only minus 14. That's an argument that even if it doesn't manifest in the ways that most people think it would, like global warming should be hotter, right? Not necessarily, not everywhere, not all the time. It's going to change the climate, though, quite significantly, right? It's hard to argue that there aren't changes happening. It's just now attributing where those changes belong, which is like the big concern. So for me, to wrap it all up neatly,
Sure.
people deserve to have an opinion, and the merits of that opinion are the same on the basis of the fact that they're human beings. Not everybody, in my mind, is going to give the same, like, if once again, you talked about the doctors versus someone who watched the doctors on TV, for example. You didn't say that, but that's what I'm saying. The doctor versus someone who watched the doctors on TV. I'm going to trust a medical authority, not just because they're an authority, but because they have actual medical training. They're looking at my specific case. They see my symptoms, and they're going to give me a more personalized response. And you know what? If I for any reason think that that doctor's just like lying, I mean, I could be straight up lying, then I can go to another doctor. I'm still going to trust the combined opinion of those doctors more than anybody who watched some doctor on daytime TV. So I don't know that I would use the word merit so broadly, because I would say that the merits of an opinion based on an argument, a specific argument, yes, that there are some people that have more merit that should have more input on that. But in general, everybody has the same level of merit as far as their opinion goes. That's kind of my spiel.
Okay, so just to kind of address a few of those things. One, when I said that I don't think that, like, I don't want to hear these people's opinions, I meant individually as a person. I'm not saying that they don't deserve to have their voice heard in a platform, but I also don't have to listen to shit that I don't want to listen to. So when somebody comes at me with like, did you hear about the like, you're not smart enough to talk about politics with me. I don't want to talk to you, which is, again, you could argue narcissism, dickhead move, all you, like, anybody wants, but I, as an individual, don't have any reason to have to listen to them. Yeah, I think that they should probably be able to get their opinion heard in some way. I don't necessarily believe, I think that I'm going to kind of try to metaphor it a little bit. If intelligence is like a power level in Dragon Ball Z, I don't think that everybody needs to be at the forefront of the Cell games. I think that the Krillins can fight with the Yamchas, and that's totally fine. But I don't want a Krillin who's really good at talking to be fighting against a Goku, because I would rather have the Goku and the Cell going at it, the Goku and the Gohan going at it, where we can get actual productive discussion, where we're not being weighed down because some idiot doesn't understand some of the fundamentals of what are being said. And again, I think it's totally fine for people to have those opinions, but I don't think that they're all equal inherently. Like, you can, again, with the personal thing, that one I feel like is kind of just like a bit of a subjective thing. My main issue that I take with it is that people just having an opinion, and this is something that Ryan sort of said before, but I think that having like an opinion internally, people can literally believe whatever they want, and I won't hold any umbrage with that. But when you open up and say your opinion in any sort of a setting, whether it be, like in a one-on-one discussion or in a public forum or anything like that, you're opening yourself up to criticism, and you have a responsibility to be upheld to certain standards. So when you have decided that you're going to share that opinion, you are opening yourself up to somebody like me coming in and criticizing it as a person. I get to do that because you decided to give me that opinion. Now you can make an argument that maybe I'm not qualified to do so, but that's something they've decided to do. And if they want to beat me in that argument, that's their right. One thing that I did take a little bit of umbrage with what you said was you said that if people were to take the data and form their own conclusion, that was perfectly valid. That part I completely disagree with. I don't think that the average person in most fields are qualified to form conclusions from data given. I think that experts in science and things like that tend to have peer review for a reason, right? The average person can't understand the conclusions that are made from data that's taken. So that's why we have peer review, right? So one scientist can't just say a thing and then it's like, oh, but I'm an expert, so you just have to believe me. Like, no, other scientists will review what they say. They'll take their papers. They'll form their own conclusions based off of the data that's given, or sometimes they'll take their own data, and then they'll either challenge or agree with it. Most of the time, scientists won't publish a paper until it's already been peer reviewed to the point where you can, as the general public, expect that it's been found to be true. And the ones who do go, without doing peer review, generally you will be able to find, information somewhere that they have not been peer reviewed, and then you would put that into your analysis of it. But I don't think that humans in general are qualified to take data and form their own conclusions, because I think that data in the wrong hands is really, really dangerous. For example, I have had arguments with race realists, and for anybody who doesn't know, these are people who believe that they advocate for the most part for ethnostates based off of race, because they think that the human race is not all. No, sorry, this is actually a really bad representation. I think they think that every race of people, as in black, white, Hispanic, Asian. Some people throw Jewish in there differently, which I don't necessarily know if that's supposed to be the case, but
I don't know.
Belong to different races of people and need to be segregated because they don't play well with each other, and it's purely because of genetic differences. And the problem is you can find data that's true but form incorrect conclusions from it. So some of them I've heard cite data. What was it? I've heard like they'll take stats that are true, like we need to have a separate place for white and black people because if you look at stats, black people are overrepresented in crime stats per capita in the United States, which is a true statistic. But then they will go and form the conclusion that's because of who they are as people. That's there's a genetic reason for that, which is not true. And I mean, someone will probably challenge me on that, but the leading experts in the field right now, from the opinion that a lot of it is environmental factors, socioeconomic conditions are the main reason for that. Because if you actually look at other graphs, you'll more so see that poor people are overrepresented in crime, and in the United States, black people are overrepresented in the poor crime statistics or in poor people statistics. Therefore, those things. So you can't just look at look at this data that says that these people do this. Look at these two lines. This one's higher than this one. Therefore, this. I don't think the average person's able to form conclusions based off of that, because you can look like that data that people cite often is true, but it's really, really disingenuous.
Out of context, at least, right?
Yeah, right. But people don't. I don't think people are smart enough to understand context when it comes to complicated things like forming policy or economics. Not to get to too much of a topic change, but are you familiar with Borhaus's study in the context of immigration, low skill immigration, and how it affects the economy in general, or no?
Hold on, let me just Google it really quick.
Baurhaus, Borhaus. I'll bring it up myself as well, because I haven't looked at this in a little while, but I've seen. Oh, maybe
I'm reading.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just thinking. I was just doing a thing on the coast of Utopia.
On the coast of Utopia?
No, that wasn't the right one, I don't think.
Oh, I thought you were playing a video game or something.
No, oh yeah, dude, I can handle this shit. I can do two things at once. Maybe it was BOU. I don't remember how to spell it. Jesus, this is awful. Oh, Borjas. I'm sorry. Yeah, George Borjas. That's what it is. Borjas. Sorry, that was the thing I said, not that. So what was
George, gotcha.
Yeah, George Borjas. Yeah, I may have completely fucked that one up a little bit. But just to kind of give a there was a I want to say it was there was a large influx of new paper rekindles tiresome. This is not a new paper.
Are you talking about the 2016 dealio? I'm looking at Politico right now.
Yeah, no, I'll link you the article, actually. Jeez. Okay. Put it in chat. Sorry, everybody. I'm sure this part's a little bit boring, but I promise it's relevant and poetry. Yeah, this is the study with David Card, so this is exactly what it was. But basically, in the I think it was in the 1980s, Fidel Castro had then president of Cuba eased immigration restriction. 125,000 Cubans moved to the United States that year, and almost instantaneously, the labor supply of Miami increased by 55,000 people. So there was a large influx of low-skilled immigration that came into Miami, and obviously spread to Florida after that. But they obviously had to come into one place, and that was Miami. and like a lot of people will usually, or sorry, not a lot of people usually, when people argue that like against immigration in the United States specifically, and I've seen it, obviously been transferred into Canada from there. People argue that if you bring in low-skilled immigration, you're really giving a net negative to the economy because you're overinflating the low supply labor, and you're going to end up hurting low-skilled Native workers, not Native American, but native to that country, like people who are born in said country.
Yeah.
And if you look at the data, there is a small dip where you see the obviously, as soon as they get there and say, hey, can we come work here? We'll work for a little bit less money because fuck, dude, it's still better than what we were making in Cuba, which is true. They'll end up working for like less than what was required or what is required. They'll take jobs into the table. They'll work below minimum wage, and it makes it a lot more difficult to get a job if you're a low-skilled Native worker, which is true. And if you look at that, you can just be like, well, look how much they're fucking over these people. But when you, I think it was Borhaus and David Card, I think was the person who took the wrote a paper. Card wrote a paper about the effects of the Mariel supply shock on American-born Miamians' wages, and found no evidence of any adverse effect. The debate surrounding Mariel seemed largely settled until last year when Borhaus of University published his own study on the topic, a working version of which was circulated in 2015. As noted last May, Borhaus' study found that wages for low-skilled native-born Miamists fell noticeably following the Mariel boat lift, which is true because obviously as soon as you get there, things are going to get shitty. But when you read further into the study, over time, because this happened, I think in 1990, it actually ended up benefiting the economy as a whole because obviously having low-skilled workers will help the companies that are employing them. They can bring in they lower cost of goods because they don't have to. It's not as expensive for them to make them. They're able to expand and therefore open up supplementary positions. So people who are losing those jobs are able to bring them in. Are able to be brought up into complementary positions that are opening up because of these things. And when people are displaced in these ways, it's not entirely impossible to make if you form policy. I'm doing a real shit job of explaining this, by the way, everybody. I'm really sorry. This is the first time I've had to do this without having the research in front of me and prepared. But if you have, it's not entirely possible to take policy that will allow you to tax people who win the most from these. So this would be like, the companies themselves. You can you can tax them and redistribute that among the people who are losing out based off of this. But the economy as a whole ends up growing. This lowers the cost of living not cost of living, but the cost of goods, which will therefore lower the cost of living. Not everybody who had their jobs taken from them ends up staying with those lost, because we do still end up seeing growth in these places. People end up with better jobs than they had before. Everybody gets shit for cheaper, and then there's more jobs overall. So if you just look at some of this data, like people, where was because a lot of people when they read Borhaus' study initially were like, hey, this is totally fucking over the native Miami population, because like all these people who were like working for cheap and then leave their jobs because they get fucked in those things. But yeah, far more relevant to lawmakers, the long-running effects of immigration on wages. In theory, these depend on how immigrants change the skill composition of the workforce. If lots of unskilled workers arrive in a country, unskilled workers' wages should fall relative to everyone else's, which is basically what I said at there. But economists usually have to squint hard to find a negative effect of immigration on wages for any native workers. In the long run, immigrants tend to reduce the wages, for any native or only of past generation of immigrants whose skill presumably overlaps strongly with those of the newcomers. One study found that while immigration between 1990 and 2006 had little effect on wages of native workers, it lowered the wages of previous immigrants by 6.7%. American-born workers, perhaps because of their language, were better prepared to move on to difficult jobs. I suspected a few of the... Okay, yeah, this isn't the complete article, but that kind of the whole thing. So basically, if the point I was trying to get at is, if you just give someone the data in front of them, they'll be like, well, look here, you see like this little dip where, I don't know, I'm using like my mouse to try to illustrate a point when it's not going to show up on the screen. You see this little dip here where native workers are getting fucked. That's really bad for those people in the economy, which is true, but everybody else wins. And then they end up getting wins that come later, and you can redistribute the wealth that's being gained in these places to help them out in the meantime. And because economics is not a zero-sum game, which you and I talked about earlier, but basically when you're taking away a certain amount of money from one place, it is possible to gain more than that amount of money in other places, which overall is better for everybody, right? If I was to say, like, if I have $10 and you have $5 and Ryan has $2, and somebody says to me, hey, if I take $2 from you, Ryan can have $5 extra. That's better for everybody because at the end we can redistribute those earnings. Everybody ends up closer to the means. We can retax people in different ways so that everybody comes out with more money, and then you still don't get fucked super hard, right? Like if I lose $2 from my 10, that's not nearly as big of a deal as it would be to just keep somebody at $2 if their cost of living is at like 4. If I can give them $2 and they end up making another 3 afterwards, maybe I can get one of those dollars back. Then everybody ends up kind of winning out in the end. You will obviously see like a little bit of a drop from people at the very top, but that's not, I don't really care that much because they don't need it that much. Like, oh no, now I can't have a 5th jet ski. Fuck. At my 3rd summer home, this is bullshit. Like, you don't need that many summer homes. So I kind of went on a big fucking tangent there, but yeah, feel free to respond to as much of that as you want. But go ahead. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to also just throw a fucking source at you either. But I thought I wasn't really particularly articulate with this point. But the end all point I was trying to make there was that when you look at the data quickly, like you'll see, this is a soft science. Obviously, economics is obviously a very soft science because you're looking for a predictive nature of people. You're looking at like how are people going to react in these situations, and that's complicated because people do react in predictable ways, but there's a lot of variables that you have to take into account that'll affect things like this. So if you just look at the data, a lot of people would form the conclusion that it's a bad thing, whereas in the end it kind of looks like it's a good thing. That was kind of like my dumbing down version of it, but go ahead.
And okay, so I think that there are some fundamental, I think we agree on almost all points as far as data goes. The one thing that I want to say, because I do agree that statistics are both wonderful. I don't mean to say that you said this, but I mean that I agree with in general at this point that statistics can be really wonderful because they can help you plan things much better based on for example, what people really want or what people really need, or if crime is particularly high in an area based on the statistics for the area, then maybe you can figure out how you can deal with that.
I don't disagree with this at all.
Yeah, and it gives you a lot of information, right? And your point about how the average person isn't equipped, I use the word qualified. I just say equipped even.
You can say either one, yeah.
Yeah, because I think that the average person isn't equipped to deal with statistics on problems that are unintuitive, specifically. Now, when I say unintuitive, what I mean is that in the same way that once you get down, below the scale of animals, even below the scale of bacteria, in science, and I am going on a tangent, but it does relate back. But you get to a point when you get down to quantum physics, for example, where things that you think should happen or that shouldn't happen. So, for example, in a quantum world, if you were able to shrink down to that level, you would see particles just mysteriously appear out of nowhere and then disappear again, like they're teleporting, or they've just made out of nothing. They've just showed up. You would be in a world where everything is so unpredictable that you could see a step in front of you, and then you went to go step on it, and it's gone just like that. It's just vanished. Now, to our brains, which were designed for being hunters on the savannah, hunters and foragers, mostly foragers, and then hunters a little bit later. We once we figured out tools and fire, that was important. But anyways, we were not evolutionarily engineered to solve problems beyond what we could see on the horizon, or what was grumbling in our stomach, or the things that wouldn't help us propagate and survive. So when you bring that kind of mindset of the African savannah person forward, depending on which version of which one of our ancestors you're talking about, it could be a few million years. But even just even in the past 100,000 years, since we've learned how to use, or is it fire that's 100,000 years, or is it dogs? Anyways, there has been a certain amount of time since we've learned how to use tools, which really marked us apart from other animals, and then fire and all of that up until now. And during that time, we have not had to deal with issues up to about maybe 5,000 years ago. The average person has not had to deal with issues that are any bigger than the size of your current tribe. And your tribe might be maybe 100 people, and that apparently is the limit of how many social connections you can make personally, how many people you can personally know well. Um, Now, all of a sudden, within less than the blink of an eye in evolutionary time perspectives, you are dealing with issues like um, the ozone layer depletion, which everybody agrees was caused by people. Okay, and if you don't, then you need to stop watching Infowars. I'm sorry, but basically,
Alex Jones knows a lot of stuff. Okay, don't you fucking dare discredit Alex Jones like this.
I can't.
I'm sorry. Yeah, super memeing. Just go ahead.
Everybody knows that the hole in the ozone layer was caused by people, specifically our usage of CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons. And in order to fix it, we needed to, at the very least, stop using them immediately. That was the thing we needed to do. It was generally recognized by governments at the time that this was a huge problem because people in Australia were starting to get skin cancer at crazy rates, oddly enough, where the biggest hole was centered over. So it wasn't the average person in Australia, even, who looked up at the sky and said, "Boy, I'm sure feeling that ozone hole getting bigger every day as people are using CFCs in their ACs." No, it was scientists over, I don't know actually how many years it is, but through studies and through observation, we discovered that there's a big ass hole in the ozone layer and it's getting bigger. What the hell is going on? And so while the average person in Australia might be getting skin cancer, they have no idea why. They don't know. So it took a certain level of expertise and it took observation over an extended period of time to come to the conclusion that A, there is a big gaping hole in our atmosphere that you can't see visibly. I mean, like visibly with like through normal eyes, like looking at the sky. And two, this hole in the ozone layer was very, very bad. And then number three, that we were the cause of it through our use of CFCs. And the only way that you can come to that conclusion is by seeing the data and understanding it. I am not qualified to look at that data and understand what it means unless it's laid out in a very specific way that's tailored for me to see that data. But people who are trained to understand that data and to know what the levels of ozone should be in the atmosphere, they are going to be a lot better positioned, especially in the 70s when the internet didn't exist properly. They're going to be a lot better positioned to make assumptions based on that data. And just recently, actually, I read a story that says NASA saying, "Hey guys, we did it. Good job, Reddit. We've by not using CFCs, the ozone layer is slowly starting to replenish. Over time, it's going to close up. The hole won't be there anymore. So good work, everyone. We came together." So like I said, the average person didn't come to that conclusion, and there would have been no reasonable way for them to get to that conclusion, even if they'd had the data. I mean, the average person isn't equipped or in the mindset to make that correlation between the ozone layer decreasing and increasing levels of skin cancer. They may not even know to look in those two different places, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or even care. I mean, why would the average person give a shit if they don't think that it impacts them or they don't have any idea that it impacts them? So from that perspective, I agree that in the very round way that I got to it, that the average person, although probably better equipped now than they were 20 or 30 or 40 years ago because we deal with so much data on a daily basis.
Yeah, sure, I'll agree with that.
It is still not quite ready to be citizen scientists at the same level as would make sense for sound policy making and for sound judgments about big issues. And I think that's really the thing, is that we're not talking about issues that affect individuals, where in my opinion, personal opinions might hold more sway, even though I don't agree with them necessarily. Like, so for example, if someone has cancer and their parents decide to pray, like a kid has cancer, their kids decide to pray for them rather than go to the doctor. Personally, I want to say I respect to any parents out there who are going to do that. I respect your desire to have your beliefs and your desire to live them fully because you think you might go to hell if you don't. But also fuck you because that kid might die because of you. So for individual decisions though, if you want to drink until you die because you don't think you're going to die, go for it. Fine, I don't care. But when it comes to actually making collective decisions, when we talk about, you mentioned policy before, when we talk about making policy, when we talk about effectively solving problems in the world, whether you're a government or an organization that's a nonprofit or a business, if you're one of those types of businesses, or even just a group of people who come together and want to change something, you need to start with good facts, and you need to have the context for those facts. And I think that context is the thing that that everybody misses. The average person, I should say, misses or can miss very easily if it's not laid out for them properly. Now, the problem, though, the one real caveat that I have with the argument that that people aren't equipped to develop conclusions based on just data is that we do develop conclusions based on data every day. And this is where I think the distinction is important between personal choices versus collective choices. Because I can make a choice for myself that objectively is bad. I can choose to eat chocolate, for example, and it's got lots of sugar and it's going to make me slightly addicted because there are some addictive qualities to chocolate, but I think it's super tasty. So when my subjective reasoning overwhelms my objective goodness, the goodness for my body, then I'm just going to do it. But when it comes to making policy, we want to have people who should know what they're talking about. Bring the data into a context that makes sense for making policy. I think my secondary concern with it is that I am always worried about the fallibility of people. And sounds like a really broad statement, but what I basically mean is that it is possible for people to be corrupted. It is possible for people to show misleading data for money. But I think that there's a flip side to that, which is that the sensationalist news outlets of the world and, the InfoWars and, even the hard left sites as well, all of the Occupy and all of that, they thrive on misleading statistics. They do it on purpose. It's what you said about taking a statistic that's true, because the average person now can Google. It's taking a statistic that's true and pulling it into whatever context you want. It's pulling the conclusion. I'm sure there's some. I don't want to say it's begging the question. There is some sort of debate.
It sort of is begging the question. I think I know what you're going to say. I'm just going to try to make sure I understand it. You're saying that people will form a conclusion and then find data that supports it, rather than forming their conclusion from the data itself.
And I think that's the harmful thing, is that they take their subjective feelings, which is the conclusion they've already reached,
yes,
and they find the data to fit inside of it. And that's incredibly dangerous. I think that's if there's going to be a downfall to our society, our civilization worldwide, it's going to be a result of people, at least in part, people not understanding that there is a truth to the world, that the natural world has, and by the natural world, I mean everything around us, even the things we've built abide by the laws of the natural world, whether you think they come from God or Einstein or, just exist because it's the universe.
It's from memes, Shane. Everything's from memes.
That's right. Like Thomas Jefferson said, everything's from memes. But
bitches. I think he said bitches at the end.
Well, he had sunglasses on when he said that too, didn't he?
Yes.
Sun monocle, but
and they were bifocals.
They were. Well, you can't look out at crowds and read his speech at the same time if they were like.
That would be ridiculous.
That would be ridiculous.
Yeah, Ben Franklin made them for him. It's fine.
I thought it was Gandhi that made them for him.
No, didn't Ben Franklin invent the bifocal? I was actually throwing a little bit of truth in there, dude. So it sounded real.
Oh no, I was just being ridiculous. Okay, yeah, probably.
Fuck.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm willing to give on that. I don't know. But I think that I think that like the trend of misinformation, and I'm going to use the word misinformation. I've come to loathe fake news because of certain reasons. But this trend of misinformation and people vehemently believing in it despite massive amounts of evidence and proper context to the contrary means that there are going to be possibly an entire generation or more of people who are raised in a house full of people who believe certain things, like going back almost to the Dark Ages, believe certain things because their parents beat it into them, not because of any objective truth, not because of any objective evidence, not because any expert said it was correct based on, however many months or years of study and careful collation of the data and putting it all together in a way that's, lame and readable, but because their parents said so, or because their friends said so. And therefore it doesn't matter that, for example, it doesn't matter that measles outbreaks only started happening again because stupid people stopped vaccinating their kids in the United States.
God! Oh, yeah. Have you ever seen? Because this is I was going to bring this up already, but Did you see the? I want to say it was a skit that was done by College Humor, but it was like if Google was a guy, and they basically make Google like a man who sits in an office, and people walk in and just ask their questions to him. Yeah, the one where it's like, do vaccines cause autism? It's like a mother with her kid, and he has like a giant stack of paper on his desk. And he says, "I have 500,000 results that say that they don't, and one that says that they do." And then she just like takes it out of his hand and was like, "I knew it." And he like freaks out, like, "Just because I have it doesn't make it true." Because that both brings up the measles thing with the people who are forming their own conclusions. They're like, I just need a little bit of evidence that supports what I said, no matter how much there is the contrary, and that means the thing.
To me though, it's really crazy to me because like, and of course I have my biases 100%. I will admit that right up the front, and I could talk about them later. But it's like, I feel like it's just people are going out of their way to ignore evidence in this case. Like, I feel like that's more and more the trend. And to me, it's Occam's razor. If the overwhelming, vast majority of all studies done on whatever topic it is seem to suggest a certain outcome, then unless there's something very different about the dissenting studies, then I'm probably just going to side with the one that has the most evidence to support it. Why would I just go out of my way to ignore parts of all of these studies to validate my beliefs? Like, what? Why? Is it because I'm insecure in my beliefs? I think that.
I mean, yes, that's exactly why people do that.
And yeah, that's what it probably would be. But it's like, why do you attach yourself? Like, I don't want to sound like a Buddhist here, but why would you attach yourself to these fleeting thoughts? Because your existence is not predicated on what you believe at that moment. Your decisions might be at that moment based on what you believe, but why are you against, and I'm not talking to you obviously specifically, but why are you against, well, clearly, but why would you be against changing if the way that you're living your life right now is suboptimal in some way? And it could just be suboptimal in the sense that you're not getting enough sex, or you're not being happy enough, or whatever. I mean, whatever problem you're facing, there may be a way to help overcome it if you just follow the evidence wherever it goes. I mean, if wearing that fedora isn't getting you dates after you put it on, maybe you should take off your fedora and try without it and see if that works. I mean, it baffles me so much.
Shane, it's not because of the fedora. It's because girls just want to use us. Because I'm the nicest guy ever, and I can't believe they won't go out with me. They're just so manipulative, and they're such bitches. Ugh. If only they would give me a chance, they'd see how nice I am. They can see out their window when I'm watching them 6 hours a day how nice I am.
So you took the meme, and then you went over there.
Yeah, I pushed past the meme, and I was like, this is where the meme is. I'm going to keep going down this road. Yeah. Well, it's a really ridiculous thought process. It's like, well, actually, no, that's actually a pretty good example of people who form their own conclusions and they try to find data to support it, right? If the data says this is why women aren't interested in you, it's because you scare them. But they're like, no, I'm nice though. Well, I don't know, man. Maybe the part where you're sitting outside their window and you text them 36 times in a row, they don't take that to be nice. Maybe you don't mean anything inherently scary by it, but if they follow Occam's razor, they go, maybe this guy might be a nice guy who's just really bad at talking to women, or maybe he's a serial killer. Risk reward. Oh, I might miss out on this date with this weird dude, or I might be murdered, or worse.
And I think that's a pretty rational decision at that point, right?
Yeah. You ever see that bit of Master of None with the Season Sorry show? You ever watch that?
I have. I've only watched the first season though. I haven't seen the second one.
Okay, I think this part was in the second one. There's a really good bit where like Dev ends up like running into a girl that he like knows from like a shoot or something, and then they they talk for a little bit and go their separate ways. And he goes home with Arnold, and she goes home on her own, and they it jumps back and forth between the two of them on their trip home. And for him, he keeps on doing like really dangerous shit because he's a dude and it's not that scary being a dude in New York. Like, he's like it's like really happy music playing. He's like, Arnold, let's go cut through this back alley. And then, it's like everything's great and happy and they're having a great time. And like the worst thing ever happens because he steps in dog shit or something. He's like, that was the worst day ever. Meanwhile, this girl gets like followed home by the bar and she's like well-lit areas, like always has her phone in her hand. And this guy's like following her and he's like, you just need to talk to me. I'm really nice. And then she, like, when Dev runs into her again, he realizes, like, it's like, hey, how was the night afterwards? Oh, it was the worst night ever. I stepped in dog shit. It was the worst thing ever. And then she's like, I got stuck in a pet store for 45 minutes. And then she's like, yeah, it's just like a normal day. It happens. And he's like, what do you mean that happens? That's ridiculous. Why would you get stuck in a pet store for 45 minutes? I was like, I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know what that guy was going to do. And then, he realized that situations are different for multiple people. Or for different people, but yeah, it's kind of the same thing, right? Where it's like the risk reward is not there for the girl.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Were you?
Yeah. Well, there's one other thing that I think is important though. So
yeah, hit it.
I think that, like, when we talk about opinions, and if, especially, like, we talked a little bit about soft sciences, things where there is a little bit more subjectivity because people are involved. I think it's also important to talk about like, in my mind at least, as much as we disagree with people, as much as we disagree with their opinions, and as much as we may find them invalid on the basis of the fact that they're just basically made up by them or by friends or by Uncle Jeb or whatever, I still think it's important to hear them. And the reason why is because, so for example, Milo, you know all about Milo Yiannopoulos, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, I know about Milo. Milo, my boy.
Your boy, yeah, your favorite dude.
Yeah.
So,
advocating for underage sexual relationships. Oh, dude, we're boys.
So personally, I like Milo, and before I go too far here,
Shane, no.
Before I go too far here, it's because he is a living troll in many ways. Now, at least part of it's intentional, I'm sure of it, but he tends to evoke strong feelings from people, one way or the other. And this is important to me because the issues that he's talking about, and I don't agree with underage sexual conduct for what it's worth.
Thank you.
And I don't even necessarily agree with anything he says per se, with the one exception of political correctness, which is a very loaded word, so I'm going to just stay away from that for now.
Yeah, because I think we're going to agree, but it's going to be like the thing where unless we have like a 6-hour discussion about it, it's not going to be. Yeah, I feel like I know where you're going to go with it, and I feel like we're totally on the same page.
I think that what it comes down to, though, is that Milo does not deserve to be silenced. Milo, if he makes an appearance, and people don't like the fact that he's making an appearance there, are welcome to go to his appearance and boo him and fight his opinions in a merit-based discussion, although he's probably going to shoot him down because he's one of those people who's good at talking but not necessarily
right. Yeah. Okay.
Right. But
I feel like we're not going to disagree on this. I just want to make sure I'll just save us a little bit of time. I don't think that these people deserve to be silenced, but I feel like you have to be really responsible before you platform them, right? So this is something I run into an issue with the skeptic community. Are people who will tend to go and have conversations with people who are a lot more equipped to have the discussions than they are, and they'll basically just like kind of listen to them and give them a platform to just kind of spout a lot of their rhetoric. I feel like it's fine to have somebody like Milo speak at your school, but you definitely have to either have somebody else who's equally qualified on the other side of things to kind of give perspective, either then or at a separate showing, because it's really important that you don't just give a platform to somebody who has shit rhetoric, because a lot of people don't have their minds made up on conclusions, and people are really impressionable. And yeah, like my main issue with Milo is like whether he's being a troll or not, his words carry a lot of consequence because he has an audience, and he has a lot of responsibility to, for what impressions are formed based off of what he says. I think it's really important if you're somebody who has an audience that you're very, very clear with your talking points, because what is perceived of you is to a certain extent your responsibility. If somebody's going to misrepresent what you say and you very clearly go through and you're like, now because of this, and this, I believe this. And they're like, nah, you believe this because there's one other thing that I made up on my own. Like, no, that's not really your fault. But if you don't do a really good job of arguing with them, or like stating your actual opinion and showing the work of why you get there, I think that if people form their own conclusions, it's in part your own fault. And I think that Milo is somebody who's not always necessarily ingenuous. And I think it's really irresponsible to have someone like him like speak at your school, and then you never have somebody who would be on the other side. It doesn't have to be like a formal debate. You can have him speak on his own, and then later you can have someone else who's like, I believe all these other things that are completely the opposite for these reasons. I think that's totally fine. Like I think that it's important that you engage with conversations with people who have the opposition, because this is something that people run into a lot lately, especially since the Trump election, where we kind of realized we were just kind of shutting people up a lot, and then we were like, oh well, they don't believe these things anymore because they're not talking about them, but they were just kind of getting shut up. And then we've like people who are reasonable and have what I would consider morally good opinions about things, or morally good stances on things, not opinions, aren't very good at arguing talking points that they don't believe or that they haven't had to do because they just kind of inherently thought that everybody believed them. So like, if you're going to argue with somebody about like why like pedophilia is wrong for something, like we all kind of know it's wrong, but if somebody like is like, you know, if there's like a massive like 20% of something of like people in a country who believe that it's okay, you really have to be able to tell them why it's not. Otherwise, it's like, you know, otherwise when, you know, votes come around, they'll start voting in people who can do some real damage. So I think it's important that you hear those voices. But I think that you have to be responsible with who you let talk and when, which is one of the reasons I don't like having to listen to dumb opinion, is because I'm not, either the person's just really dumb and it's not worth my time, or they're like way too good at talking about it. Like it's either like some idiot that I work with and I can just, you know, with both hands hide behind my back, hold off of a debate with them, or it's like Richard Spencer and like he's going to win that argument and I can't do anything about it. So like I would feel really irresponsible like having a debate with Richard Spencer and posting it on the internet, for example, because I'm going to come out of that debate looking like I don't know what I'm talking about, and he's going to come out being like, yeah, white people should have an ethno state, and that would be irresponsible. But I don't think nobody ever should engage with somebody like that, because if a lot of people believe in white nationalism, like we need to have a discussion about why that's kind of fucked up. Was that sorry? I kind of like just ran in here and like stole your talking point, but I just wanted to. I was going to.
Okay. Yeah, no, I wrote a few notes here just to make sure that I covered everything here. So,
yeah, please. I've been doing the same thing, so go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think okay, so I just want to cover one thing really like straightforward first, regarding specifically Milo, and why I brought him up specifically was because of the riots at Berkeley, which I don't know. That's bullshit.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, then, because basically, like, it comes down to me, like, nobody should ever be afraid to speak. In my opinion, you can like, I accept that people need to take responsibility. Like, and this is another thing I want to touch on. People do need to take responsibility in the sense that there's going to be backlash if they have an unpopular opinion, which is great and fine because you're entitled. Everyone is able to have their opinions and is able to share it with people if they want. As you said before, they have to accept responsibility for what they say. In the sense, in my mind, what that means though is that they have to be open to verbal attack, or written attack, or whatever, something that does not harm their person. Yes. Their personal safety should never be a concern because of an opinion they have. And I'm one of those people, and for whatever this is going to do for my future with anybody ever, your jobs or whatever, I do not believe that the correct response to people, even if they walk around literally on the streets with Nazi armbands doing the salute and saying white people are the best thing ever and everyone else should die, I do not believe that it is right for someone to come up and punch them, ever.
Yeah, I agree 100%. No, we're totally on the same page here. So, yeah. Okay, so I'll just like back way up to like my personal belief system. Sure. You have a right to do whatever makes you happy as long as you don't infringe upon the rights of somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, so, I think in general, yeah, I agree with that.
So like, yeah, you have to be careful with kids because they don't have agency, so that it's really easy to infringe on their rights. You can't fuck with somebody else's like inherent rights. Other than that, you can believe whatever the fuck you want. Milo can run around swinging his dick in a windmill and talking about how much he likes fucking 13-year-olds as long as he never goes and fucks a 13-year-old.
Yeah, and that's
fine. And like, it's totally fine for people to go up and be like, you're really fucked up, and like, you know, build like a giant glass wall around him and be like, no, nobody can hear you now, my dude. But no one's allowed to hit him. People can't, like, yeah, like, I think that but like, again, like, I think it's really important that you make sure that you don't just let people like this talk without having, you know, without being reasonable about it, because it's really, if you just have Milo talking, Milo's kind of like, Milo and Richard Spencer in particular really scare me because they're really, really reasonable sounding people. And a lot of their points I think are really fucked up, right? Like, it's really easy for Milo to try to present it that like have adult child relationships in the gay community are really important, because a lot of his talking points sound reasonable if you just listen to them, right? We say, no, it's a net benefit for everybody. And if you don't have somebody arguing the opposing points, like, it sounds reasonable if you don't think about it. And like I was like, no, that's really fucked, because I've had to have these thoughts before. Like I've had to defend my opinions about things before. But if people haven't, they're just like, no, pedophilia is really bad. And then it's like, well, it's not really pedophilia if he's 13, and it's actually a benefit for them. Like, okay, that actually sounds really reasonable. And then now you got a whole bunch of people who are advocating for that kind of thing, which not so much, because that's infringing upon the rights of somebody who's unable to consent to things. Like that's kind of the big fucking problem with it. Kids don't have the agency to consent, so they can't give consent in a relationship that has really fucked power dynamics. Just I
was gonna ask I was going to ask a thought experiment, but I don't even know. Like this is beyond the pale for the type of thing I'd even normally ask.
Yeah,
but I'm kind of concerned about okay. So in your mind, then, about that, and I'm, for the record, just to make sure that everybody knows where I stand on this issue, I do not believe that having sex with children is ever consensual, and you shouldn't do it because it's bad and it could fuck them up for life.
Yeah.
Also illegal, but mostly because it's bad, because of what you can do to them. Okay, so with that out of the way, assuming there was some scientifically valid way to prove that a minor of whatever, I'm not going to specify an age, to prove that a minor did have an adult level of agency, and assuming that is it's 99.8% of scientists agree that this way of mapping their mind or whatever is valid, and it produces good results that they've studied over many years. To say that a minor has the same, a specific minor we'll talk about, has the same.
We talk about individually, I understand.
Individuals, yeah. And then, is it okay then?
For adult, okay, so I'm gonna say,
I'm not even I don't even want to say the words because it's so messed up. But
I know.
But you know what I'm getting at, right?
For you, it's a good thought experiment. Yeah. So I'm going to say no, because the level of agency is really important, but also I think it's the same kind of wrong as a boss having a relationship with their employee. When there is a power dynamic in a relationship, it is impossible for the underling to give truly informed consent that anybody can know about, right? Because they don't know what the negative consequences are going to be. A child has, even if they have an intelligence level that's higher, is beholden to adults in most situations, right? They don't have the ability to go out and get a job to feed themselves. They don't have the life experience to fall back. Even if they're smart enough to be able to have the potential to do that, the number of years that they've been around, they don't have the ability to take care of themselves, so they are beholden to an adult. So if they could, they don't have the ability to say, no, I'm not going to do this. Much the same way that my parents did stuff that I didn't agree with the punishments all the time. It was really fucking dumb. And I couldn't tell them, or I couldn't argue against it, because I was beholden to them for my survival. Exactly, right? It's the same kind of thing. So I mean, I maybe in some sort of weird utopian society where all of our needs are met and kids aren't beholden to adults anymore, and there's no power dynamic, and also they have the agency, maybe. But I don't think that there's any way to, one, I don't think that we're fucking ever going to find kids who are like this, and two, in our current society, even there, you're still going to get fucked in the power dynamic thing.
Once again, just because I don't feel like it'd be cautious.
No, you were making I understand. You were making a thought experiment that was not. When you were asking me that question, it wasn't because you inherently believed the opposite. You were asking for my line of thinking.
Yeah, and actually the other reason why is because I kind of wanted to gauge whether you had an opinion that was so strong that I was trying to see if you would be amenable to evidence, even on a very strongly held opinion of yours. Obviously, it's a strongly held opinion that kind of contradicts what you think right now. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you do. So I mean, that's awesome. I think that's good, because that's that logical consistency that I look for when we're talking about stuff.
Yep, 100%.
Very important. Okay, so anyways, really kind of uncomfortable questions about having sex with children aside.
That was a weird turn there, but
well,
it's important, because if somebody can't defend that, that's the problem you run into. What if there is a one of the reasons I was kind of able to do this, I had formed this conclusion on my own, but I actually listened to a debate between between two people, and one of them was an advocate for sexual relationships with children, because they were of the opinion that it was a net benefit for everybody involved, and that informed consent was not important in the distinguishing factor. So it's really hard to argue against them, because if they don't subscribe to the opinion that informed consent matters, it's really difficult to go in that direction.
You literally can't enter into a contract to rent a house without informed consent. How could you ever like commit to an adult-child relationship?
Well, they
without
weren't saying
informed
legally. They said legally it obviously wasn't okay, but they were talking. It was a moral debate.
Oh no, but I mean but
Yeah, we as
laws
a society. Yeah, I don't disagree
like
at all. But this was like the entire framework of this conversation. Like the guy admitted right off the bat, he's like legally and in our current society, I don't think that it would work. But I
but
think that
it's
I want to rebuild a world where this would be okay. And it was like I was like, oh, like this is one of those things where I would never platform that person because having not heard the debate already, I would have gotten dicked on because I would never have been able to argue. Because I would have been like, well, informed consent's really important. I'd be like, nah, and I'd be like it is. Like that's my comeback. Like no, but it is though. Like so, like that's why I think these things are really important. I don't go. I'm Krillin. I'm not going to go fucking fight Goku on something.
so okay. So and I think that kind of leads a little bit into the next part I wanted to mention is that the concept of responsibility when it comes to platforming people in my mind is a very difficult one because in my personal opinion, and this is one that you may not subscribe to completely, and that's okay. I personally believe that if someone can manage to secure for themselves a platform through whatever means, they deserve to speak on that platform. Um, I don't think that it's anyone's responsibility to push a specific narrative with a lot of with a caveat attached that I guess the reason why I'm okay with like absolutely insane people being platformed is that firstly, any reasonable people, even if they're very good speakers, should eventually come to the conclusion that what they just said was stupid. I hope, but more importantly than that is I do believe, and maybe it's a naive belief, and this might be where kind of the difference, if there is a difference, comes into play. It's that I do believe in the primacy of good ideas. I do believe that eventually, given time and testing, the ideas that are actually true and the ones that are net beneficial will be the ones that society adopts, or that they are popular, become the most popular mainstream way of thinking, at least. So, what I mean by that is that for example, if you talk to somebody in 1200 and you told them, just anybody anywhere in the world in 1200, and told them that I mean, I guess maybe it depends on where you are, but you said, for example, that you knew without a doubt that the moon was actually made of, it was made of cheese. We'll go with cheese. Nobody has any way to refute that. Nobody has, yeah, nobody even like, most people probably have never considered what the moon's made out of. They just saw this big glowing orb in the sky. Maybe they did consider it, but they had no conclusion. But if you are super confident in what you're saying, they don't have an intellectual basis to challenge you. The average person, or even royalty, may not, depending on where you are. Even the really rich people would have very little to no basis to challenge you. But you come forward, past the Renaissance, past the Enlightenment, into the Industrial Revolution, and the average person at least understands, unconsciously at least, the scientific method. The idea that things are only things that can be proven to be untrue are untrue. I mean, even if they don't necessarily subscribe to that in their daily life consciously, you can really easily say that, if I hold up a piece of paper and say this isn't flammable, and then I light it on fire, it's clearly flammable. Like there's no way to dispute that. You do that to somebody a long time ago, and there was no way, they had no intellectual basis to challenge you on that. So,
you say that, but there are people who literally believe that the Earth is flat, dude.
Oh, I know, and that is a whole separate way of looking at it. But in general, though, the average person in the Western world, who speaks, well, I'm going to say who speaks English only to differentiate from people who may not be as informed because they haven't read the literature or haven't heard the news or whatever. The average person in the Western world, though, and maybe no, sorry, not just English. That's just totally wrong. The average person in the Western world who is of the Western culture, or who at least lives in a country that has Western culture, A, believes vaccines work and that they don't cause autism. B, believes that that there are at least some merits to the capitalist system because some people get really rich, and maybe even most people are better off than they were a long time ago. Maybe they might, once again, not necessarily consciously expressed, but they have a basis for believing these things. And so, just as those are just random examples, but the point I'm getting at is that the scientific method has become entrenched in our culture to the point where average people can't discard it. They can't they can't. I mean, when I say average, I really do mean average. I mean, you know, Mr. Flat Earther over there can say whatever he wants, and once again, entitled to his opinion, although I would never take his opinion seriously when it comes to matters of the earth, probably. But these ideas will eventually rise to the forefront. The ones that are really transformative, that are really good, that will improve life in some material way will come to the top. Unfortunately, because there is a flip side to it, it might take a very long time for that to happen. So in that sense, the people who are extreme having platforms, Donald Trump being, I don't know if he's just whatever he is.
I mean, he has a platform. You can't argue against that.
Oh no, he definitely has a platform. 300%. He's got more of a platform than than he should. Than most people. Maybe no. Than he should definitely.
Than approximately half of the people in the United States think. I agree. You say most people, but like I mean, I know it was an electoral college win, Shane, but that was also a pretty close vote. Admittedly, not exactly great candidates on either side in that election. But
a lot of people didn't vote. But
yeah, well,
what I'm saying though is that yes, the biggest threat to my way of thinking, and this is something I'm very cognizant of, is that I think that in the eventual long term, as long as we don't destroy ourselves, the best ideas will come up. And I don't know exactly how that'll happen. Maybe it's naive. Actually, more than anything, maybe I'm just brainstorming it. But I think that the short term, we face the potential of nuclear annihilation, which is kind of a problem. Also, the reemergence of diseases, et cetera, et cetera.
We have such big buttons, Shane. Nobody has bigger nuclear buttons than we do. Okay, it's a really big deal.
I like to think that eventually, though, that the people who believe in the ideas that make the most sense to improve quality of life and standard of living will be more successful than those who don't. And in kind of a weird type of natural selection, eventually those ideas will come through, whether it's because of political changes or economic changes or just changes in general. Not that we're going to outbreed people that are, not even that I'm necessarily one of those people, but that eventually those ideas will come through. They will be the dominant threads in society, and we will move forward. So in that way, I don't think that giving extreme people platforms is bad. Now, what I do disagree with, though, what I really strongly disagree with, and I think we might agree on this point, is that when it comes to, especially when it comes to hard sciences, but even maybe a little bit less so soft sciences, depending on what they are, when it comes to things that have testable hypotheses to them, which is most things, but more than that, have good data to support them. The one person over here who has the belief that the world is flat should never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, be given the same level of, how can I say this, factual credibility as the 7.49 billion people over here who believe that the earth is round. That's one thing I do disagree with. And I think it kind of ties in with your idea that you should have two equally competent speakers debating these, or at least speaking on their own, given their own times. I agree with that. I think in the principle of the fact that these two people who have completely opposite beliefs, one of them is probably going to be supported by more evidence, and that should be acknowledged. That should be acknowledged before anything starts. And this person here can have whatever crazy ass platform they want, as long as it's not as who was it? I think it was not Jon Stewart, not Stephen Colbert, John Oliver. As John Oliver was talking about, that one guy who Fox always brings on to debate Bill Nye the Science Guy about climate change. Because it's one-on-one and they're given about the same time, it's as if they both have the same level of factual credibility, right? Mm-hmm. But when you look at the actual the data and the people who interpret the data, the divide would be more like 1 versus 99. So 99 people on this side, one person on this side, and these people all have the same belief about climate change versus this one guy who has a different belief. That makes more sense to me. If you're going to give them representation, make sure it has the right context of where that's coming from.
Yes.
This guy believes this from the perspective of God. This guy believes, or these people believe it from the perspective of observable evidence. Maybe this guy has observable evidence too, but does it fit in the context of what you're talking about when it comes to climate change? Like, it rained really hard in California this year and there was a flood.
Oh, that one guy threw that snowball, like the politician who like walked outside and threw a snowball, and then he was like, "Global warming, not a real thing." Fucking yeah. Yeah, I want to make sure that I was clear earlier.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think these people should be. No, it's okay. When I said I don't think people should be given a platform, I mean literally given. If you build your own platform, fucking go crazy. But I mean, like, I don't think that it's responsible. Like, if we had like 200,000 subscribers and we were to bring on like a really smart sounding race realist who doesn't have an audience, that's really irresponsible because we're going to lose that argument, and we just gave his platform to 200,000 people that he didn't earn on his own. That's really scary. Now, if it's, you're a guy who already has 200,000 subscribers and that guy's got 400,000, it's less of a big deal. If you've got equal merit with the speakers, that's less of a big deal. If you're somebody who wants to push a narrative and you bring on people who are a little bit dumber sounding than you, that you can also do that because you have your own platform that way. But yeah, when I said like I don't think people should be given a platform, I mean like if you are somebody who already has one, you need to make sure you're really responsible before you give it to somebody else.
So how do you define responsibility though? Like, and what I mean is, for example, the race realist thing. So let's say that, let's say that you have let's not even do race realism. Let's do chemtrails or some other bullshit.
I don't know anything about chemtrails, dude. So probably not that one.
Oh no, it's basically just think of any crackpot theory that someone's come up with. Flat earthers, even better.
Okay, sure, yeah. Just
so there's a flat earther with an audience of 3 million people, right?
Yeah.
He's actually invited on a news program with a regular viewership of 3 million people to debate somebody who is, an earth scientist of some variety.
Mm-hmm.
Or an astronaut, or, just someone who's actually been in space before.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy one.
So, but I mean, is that responsible? Like, is it because of the number of viewers? Is it because of the size of the platform? Is that what defines responsibility then? How do you do that? Like, do they bring a flat earther on at all? And if they don't, why don't they bring a flat earther on?
I think that it's fine to do so. I think it's just important that you make sure that you have somebody who can hold their own on the other side of things, right? And the context is presented responsibly, right? You don't have like a YouTube channel where you bring on these two people and then you let the flat earther talk as much as you want, and then every time the guy goes to counter a point, you're like, hang on a second, I got to read the super chats, and then you throw them in that direct fucking like that shit gets really. If you're a moderator, you have a responsibility to moderate properly. And again, like I don't think that results are the important thing. If the scientist shows up one day and he fucks up really badly and he comes out of that debate looking like an idiot, it's not the platform's fault for like, well, he didn't do his fucking job today. Like you have to go in with a reasonable level of expectation, right? I think it would be really irresponsible if like I've always brought like just back to like the examples because I know the names. Like if somebody was like if CNN was like, okay, we're going to have two people on to debate race realism. Richard Spencer, we're going to have you come on and debate the right side of things. And this guy from Canada with 25 viewers, Kyle, you want to come on and talk with him? That's really irresponsible of them. Because, like, really? You're going to bring on this guy who had, like, 2 discussions about it while he was playing video games with his friends? Do you think he's qualified to do that? Not really. And it would be equally irresponsible of me to agree to go to something like that now. Now, if it was, you want to have this debate with...
the responsibility then isn't just on the platform owner; it's also on you as someone who wants the truth to come out, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. It's equal. Okay. It's also on me. Yes, okay. Not equally because like I would be a little bit scared. No, realistically, what I would probably because then you get into a really interesting thing. It was like, what if it's like, well, it's you or it's nobody? Then it's like, oh fuck, that's really scary because it's like, am I going to do more damage than letting him talk on his own? But I would have a responsibility at that point. Like I'd be writing to some people and be like, I need some fucking help with this shit because I'm gonna get my ass wrecked if I don't have talking points ready to go. And then realistically at that point, I would probably have to resort to debate trickery because I'm not gonna win. Like I'm gonna get straw manned and not realize I'm getting straw manned. I'm gonna get galloped and not be able to stop him. I'm not going to catch every appeal to tradition or every appeal to emotion. And like, that's when someone does that for a living, like it's really difficult to argue against them. But yeah, no, the responsibility is on the platform owner. It's also on the participants, right? I think it would be irresponsible of me not to go on a platform, like assuming I have time, right? Like it's not like I have to fucking like, well, I'm not showing up to work today because I have to go on this debate. But like, if there was somebody who's really like unintelligent sounding, like like a Tara McCarthy, for example, the race realist who is half Indian, half Jewish, who for some reason thinks that she's white enough for a white ethno-state. I think it would be really irresponsible of me not to go on to a debate and let her have like an entire platform to herself, because she'll probably sound sort of intelligent, but like, fuck, dude, she's not smart enough to hold up to any amount of scrutiny. So like, I could probably handle that. I'd still have like, I'd still take it seriously. I'd still have to go and make sure I had like, done a little bit of research, made sure that I had my talking points in order before I did so. But yeah, I think that there's a responsibility. Like, choosing to act or choosing not to act is something that you have to think about before you do it. Like, you have to know what the consequences are in either direction.
So I think,
did that answer your question?
Yeah. I think, I think, yeah, I mean, I can understand where you're coming from. I'm not really sure exactly where I stand on that, so I'll have to think about it some more. But I think that, like, I agree that ideally everyone would be responsible, like in many things. I think that kind of stems for me from a desire to think about how it would affect others more than anything else. Because if I lose a debate because my facts are wrong, great. If I lose a debate because I'm shitty at speaking, well, I can understand that. But if my losing a debate shifts the cultural language and I just wasn't able to present my side effectively, even though there were many good points, for example, I didn't bring up because I was shit at it, then that would be unfortunate. I think that would be the type of thing that I would personally feel bad about, anyways. And so going with your example of being brought on to debate someone who's a good speaker, you mentioned Richard Spencer. I think just to pull away from that a little bit, but still kind of stay in the realm there. I think that the thing that I'm scared of most when we start talking about, like, and we talked about, how people shouldn't feel physically threatened because of what they believe, and even what they say necessarily. No, I mean, of course, and I do actually believe in a line where you say you should kill people of a certain whatever. I do think that there should be a line there. Which I know that you agree with, but I'm stating it out there plainly to say.
No, I understand. You're not just talking to me here. It's fine.
Yeah, it's just, I think that the concept of, I mean, maybe we've taken hate speech a little too far in some regards. I think maybe in the sense that everyone says hate, like everyone says, oh, I'll sue you for hate speech. I don't necessarily mean the laws are that bad yet. I haven't really seen anyone prosecuted for anything.
No, I really think that they're not as big of a deal as people are making them out to be. I think that there's certain like issues with them in a utopian society, but I think that with for the most part, like I understand that right now they're being used to prop up groups that are disenfranchised for the most part, and to try to kind of like even this back up a bit. So,
well, I think for me, I mean, because there's a difference between having a law and enforcing a law, right? And for me, obviously, inciting violence, that is a no. Like, you just can't do that. It's the same. It's the same as shouting fire in a crowded theater to an extent, especially if you have a large following. If you say you should kill this type of person, that's just no. I don't believe that is acceptable. The hate speech thing is a little bit, and obviously I am, of course, the least depressed like person that you can imagine, in the sense that I'm white. Dude. Yeah. So I don't deal with anything, obviously, that people who would accuse someone else of hate speech would deal with. But I'm glad to see that we appear not to have gone overboard with the enforcement yet. And I'm hoping we never do. I'm hoping that if it can be said that laws can be deterrents for anything, that maybe the threat of a large fine or whatever I think there's imprisonment for hate speech, depending on what it is, potentially. Yeah, go ahead.
No. I was just want to make sure. Are you talking about I think it came up specifically. I think it was New York, and I think we also had it in Canada. What was it, the C something bill? Is this one you're talking about? Like the one where that's what I want. There we go.
Let me pull it up here because.
The C something bill. It was about how was it 52?
I seem to remember that it was not super recent, but it was within the last couple of years, I think. One more specifically, blah blah blah.
Bill C-16, is this the one you're talking about? Yeah, this bill has received royal assent and is or will soon become law. This enactment amends the Canadian Human Rights Act to add gender identity and gender expression to the list of prohibited grounds of discrimination.
Yes, yeah.
That's what you're talking about? Okay. So
I think, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, this is one where people are getting concerned right now, where it's like, oh, if this person identifies with a different gender and you call them by the wrong thing, you can face
Yes,
legal action.
that is 100% the one. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so dude, like I've read this one. The bill actually literally it only adds gender to the same category that we have of protected class that we have for things like sex, which there is a biological difference that not everybody subscribes to, but there's like sex is the biological, which nobody will ever argue. A transgender person will not argue with you about someone's sex because that's the biological nature of what you were born. If you were XX, you were a woman. If you were XY, you were a man.
Yeah.
If there's some sort of if there's some sort of birth defect, you fit on a different scale because fucking any reasonable person's going to say that. If you were born with like both parts or neither part or something different, you're something different.
Yeah.
Gender being whether you subscribe to it or not, a different thing, right?
Yeah.
So gender is being added to the same category as sex, race, religion. You can't be discriminated against for these things. So you're not going to I think it's reasonable to say like if a judge goes into a thing and it's like, okay, why are you in court today? Your Honor, my coworker was really malicious. One day he said she, and I identify as he now. Okay, so he said it one time. Yep. Was he being a dick about it? Not really. Like it was an accident and he apologized and everything was fine. You're not fucking going to get fined for that shit. But it's like, it's the same way that you can't be, the same way that right now you can face legal action if you continuously make fun of somebody for their religion. Their sexuality is another one of these categories as well, right? You can't make fun of people for being gay. You can't make fun of people for their religion. You can't make fun of people for their race.
Yeah.
They're adding transgenderism or gender to that category. And obviously transgenders would be the most affected in that way. You can't go around purposely misrepresenting somebody, like purposely fucking with their pronouns, purposely fucking with their like first name, and like, okay, Gary, or should I say Gloria? look what I did, guys! Everyone see the clever thing. That's kind of where that comes into practice. Like, yeah, if I would say that this would be like if we were seeing issues where it came up where it's like, oh yeah, a lot of people are running into issues with this. Like a lot of people are putting in false allegations, and we're seeing a lot of false positives. Like, yeah, we would have to re-examine the bill at that point, but in writing, it's adding a category to a protected class. And we've never seen any issues with those protected classes of abuse, and I don't think we're going to see any issues currently.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of that's where I want to. Like we were talking briefly before we started about kind of like my ideal society of sorts, where basically everyone kind of enters into free voluntary association with each other. We don't need a government to regulate anything because we all just get along well enough. And we solve our problems by coming to some sort of consensus individually, etc. When we need a road built, we chip in together and get that road built, etc. But in this case, I think that I like that idea because I love the idea of like the highest level of individual freedom. Like I think that in an ideal society, if we didn't have literal psychopaths and sociopaths and assholes, like just extreme assholes, some assholism is of course fine, but that would be cool. And maybe one day we'll get there. Like I believe that there could be a system that exists, sometime in the distant future where, you're kind of automatically, whether it's ostracization, whatever it is, there's some reason why you don't do bad things, even if you are a person who's predisposed to make other people's lives worse. There's some sort of system that just kind of dispenses it automatically. Or maybe as a society we move on, we get brain implants to make us happy, for whatever reason we can live in that society. Right now we don't live there yet. So but it's very important to me that whilst we live in this kind of and maybe forever, will we live in an imperfect society, or at least in a society that has a lot of people causing a lot of harm to other people, that we balance still the amount of freedom that we have with things like hate speech and other things that could conceivably be used to infringe on the person who's talking's rights, if that makes any sense. So what I'm basically saying is that I don't have a problem with the laws right now, and in fact they probably could be stronger and I wouldn't even notice, and the enforcement probably could be even stricter and I wouldn't notice either, because I don't think that maybe it's just because as Canadians we're not litigious people generally, but it's like there's no problem with it now, and I don't foresee a problem happening with it. I just want to be very careful that when we're crafting new laws in the future, that we aren't. I don't want to say slippery slope because I feel like that's overused. But I don't.
It's so overused, but I know what you mean. And it's like,
yeah, and the more control that you give whoever's in power right now it could be completely benign, but in the future, the whole story, Orwell, et cetera, more and more power given to, or power can be used by good people for good things. It can be used by bad people for bad things. And I'm oversimplifying by saying good and bad people, but it can be used for good intentions or ill. And so that's what I'm concerned about. I am 100% behind people who socially who tend to have at least in theory. I mean, I'm still working out exactly how it works in practice, but in theory, at least, I'm definitely behind people who are discriminated against on the basis of things that really aren't within their control, especially.
Yeah.
I think that those people they shouldn't be discriminated against them. There should be a way for them to level the playing field at some level, I think. I don't believe that there's any reason why we shouldn't treat any human being as any other human being, as much as possible. And maybe living in a super multicultural city has, I like to, I don't, like all of my friends who are of different ethnicities or who grew up outside of Canada, and there are many of them because of the high level of diversity here in Calgary. I don't really see them as anybody different, obviously. And I think that will be the case for anybody who lives and works with people who are different than you for a long period of time. You just don't even notice. They're just your friends, or they're just people you know, or they're people you hang out with, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think that and I think that kind of, what am I getting at? I'm basically getting at that if we can all start to treat each other as human beings eventually one day, whilst respecting that people are different, then we can get closer to that society where we don't need to worry about slippery slopes as much.
Yeah,
that's a basic idea.
I'm pretty sure we agree on this. In my utopian society, I think that it would be fair game to make fun of anybody for anything, because it'd be great. You could make fun of people for the color of their skin. You could make fun of people for their sexuality. You could make fun of people for their sex, their gender, or anything. But
because they're not at a disadvantage because of it.
Yeah, but right, exactly. And this is something that I've had to. I don't have as strong beliefs of, mostly because I haven't had the thought process for them for a long time. Because this is something that I'm a white dude. Fucking being a white dude's easy as shit. Okay, there's literally what is the insult that you have to make fun of somebody for being white? You know what? I need to go see a doctor now because that means literally nothing. Right. But I haven't really thought about this until I had a long conversation with my fiance about this. But basically, this was something where I was asking her why, because we were arguing about my thing was I think that there should be equal opportunity for everybody, and she wanted closer to equal representation, which I was like, well, I don't really agree with things, specifically for gender, because obviously that's her thing. As a white woman, that's the one thing that she doesn't have is she's not a dude. And I was like, why is representation is important? If things work out the way they're supposed to, then you have if everyone has the same opportunity, then people should succeed or fail on their own merits. If it's 9 dudes who get a job and it's 1 woman, if the 9 dudes were better than every other woman who applied, I think that those guys deserve that job. And she wanted to be really it really opened my eyes up when she said, I'm trying to think of the way that she said it, that there are certain things that come up over the course of her life that she has to deal with on a daily basis that somebody like me doesn't. So she's somebody who's also into games. When I walk into a game store, it's a fucking really chilled time. I walk in, they'll ask me if I want any help. If I do, they'll give me help. If I don't, they won't. And they'll pretty much leave me alone until I'm ready to pay. Other patrons will pretty much leave me alone unless somebody really wants to be a dick that day, I guess. When she goes into a game store, she gets questioned immediately by either staff or patrons pretty much every time, and tested for her knowledge. Either she's there buying for her boyfriend or for her brother because she couldn't possibly be into these things herself. She's going to get recommendations that she doesn't have any fucking interest in because she already knows what she wants. And this one comes up a lot with guys, because we've been going to conventions for a couple of years, who fucking feel the need to test people on their shit. Oh, you're a girl gamer who's a fan of this series. I want you to name every microscopic thing about this thing to prove that you're as big of a fan as I am. And this is something I've never really had to run into, because when I engage in those discussions, it's by choice because I want to have a dick measuring contest with somebody. But the important part is that I'm choosing to engage in that discussion. So if I don't want to have that discussion, I don't have to have it. Whereas she gets fucking gatekept from that kind of a community all the time based off of her sexuality, or not sexuality. I'm sorry, her fucking not based off of her sexuality, based off of her sex. Because she's a chick, and you have to prove yourself to me to prove that you're really a woman. Are you sure you're not just a fake gamer girl who's just here to get attention? Are you sure that you're a real nerd? Like,
and I think the funniest part of all of that, the funniest part to me, is that, like, and I don't just abstracting from all of the gender issues and race and sexuality and all of that, is why do they care? You know, like what difference does it make to him? Let's assume she was there for the attention, and I based on what I know of her, she wasn't. But even if she was, who gives a shit? I mean, what if she wants the attention?
I think I figured out where the context of that comes from. So for guys, especially guys that are closer to our age, they feel they have a strong sense of resentment towards women, because when we were a little bit younger, elementary, middle, and high school, when we were into nerd culture, it was frowned upon. Girls made fun of us, and we wouldn't know how to talk to them, and everything was really hard. And now all of a sudden, we've got a little bit older, it's really cool for girls to be into things, and now they're all going to see Marvel movies, and they feel. You ever see something happen at a? You ever worked at a job where, like, fuck, you live in Alberta. Even if you haven't worked at a job, I'm sure you've heard a story of somebody who gets like really mad when they've had to prove themselves over the course of their hang on, Alex just texted me. I think she was listening to her thing. Dude, can you also mention the fact that we were talking about Pokemon games the other day, and I said that I had basically all the remakes, and the dude named them all and was like, even Fire Red and Leaf Green. Yeah, Alex, that happened. Yeah, we went in to buy a Pokemon game. Sorry, a bit of a non sequitur. And yeah, the guy was asking questions. I think that this was one of those things where, because she's had to run into this a lot, it probably was like, okay, this is another one of those situations. To me, it seemed like a situation where the guy was like really interested in striking up a conversation and was really nervous about it. But yeah, I'm also going to understand that if you've been fucking nagged about it 7,000 times by dudes, is the 7,001st person not also going to be the same way? From my perspective as the guy, like as kind of the default, it seemed like this was a guy who was trying really hard to trying to impress her, because even though she was there with me and we were very clearly a couple, like she's a hot lady, and he probably doesn't see a lot of hot ladies coming into his game store. But yeah, sorry. So to get back to the,
so many thoughts going through my head. Anyways, yeah.
I know. Sorry, I wasn't trying to go on that non sequitur, but she literally just texted me about it, because I guess you can hear me from the other room. But yeah, so basically, fuck, what was I doing right before that? Yeah, so like people really run into the people get really resentful, right? Because they're like, oh well, I didn't have to go through this. Or sorry, I was asking about the question about like people who were like, they when they got like hazed, or like they had to learn how to do things really difficultly, and then when the new generation comes in at like a job, things have been made a lot easier, and then they feel a sense of resentment, right? Oh, I didn't have all this opportunity when I was growing up in this job. I had to do it all the hard way, and I think you should have to do it too, even though it's better for everybody now that things have been improved, right? I think you see the same kind of thing with nerds and games, and not games, but like nerd culture in general, right? I had to go through it when it wasn't cool, and I had to get belittled. I don't think it's fair that you get to just jump in now that it's cool, which is like, fuck off, dude. Now there's more people who like the same shit that we have. Now there's more games being made than ever because more people are buying games. Now there's fucking superhero movies like 4 times a year, when it used to come up every once in a while. How big of a deal was when the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies came out? Really big deal, because there weren't that many superhero movies. Now fucking it's an entire cinematic universe. There's 2 of them, but only one of them is actually any good. So fucking stay away from DC.
No, I was going to say DC is the better one for sure. But anyways, continue.
Oh, fucking Shane, you know what? That's a whole separate conversation. Marvel's clearly the better one, and I'm going to kick you in the nuts. But no. But like, this is better for everybody. Dude, fucking, how much better is it? We're people who play games not for a living, because we don't make any money off of this, right? But like, how much better would it be if like more women were into games? We could double our audience. We could have 50 viewers, Shane.
We could have 50.
Yeah. Well, like, this is clearly better for everybody. But like, oh, I feel a sense of resentment because these women made fun of me. I was younger. First of all, is it the same people? Because that's kind of, hey, Babs, chill the fuck out. That's not the same. That's not really fair. Like, people will attribute the wrongdoings of a group of people onto every individual in that class.
And like, I feel like that's, I mean, obvious.
Yeah,
I mean,
some women made fun of me, so every woman it has to be held accountable for that. Like, fuck off.
I think, I think that's. It's going to sound obvious for me to say this, but that's just not. That's just no.
Yeah, and I want to finish
on any level. Yeah. Go ahead.
Real quick before I forget about it. I was using that as an example, but like that's a thing for women, and specifically I was using an anecdote because I think it fits, right? Like the logic I think is still sound, even though I fell back on an anecdote. But that's for women, which is arguably like the least shitty disenfranchisement you can have. Like, being a white chick, the only thing you don't have is sex, and like culture has kind of shifted in a way that it's not as much of an issue as it was 20 or 30 years ago. I think that the next generation of women growing up are probably going to feel a lot less disenfranchised than the current one, because when they're growing up, they're going to have a lot more female role models represented in media. They're going to have culture that accepts women. Whereas, growing up, it was like, okay, how many women are there in TV? None. Oh, here's Dana Scully now. So, like, that's great. We had Ripley, who was cool
I just want to
in the
mention
80s, and now Scully a decade later. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
All I've got to say is Scully was a goddamn badass, and I loved her when I was a kid. So for what that's worth.
Scully's great. Yeah, but it's also really easy. Or like you ran into the same problem with fucking gamers, right? Where people don't like take into account how like when you're the default, it's really easy, right? Do you remember like 7 or 8 years ago when like every fucking game was like every protagonist was Nathan Drake? They were all like white dudes with short brown hair, and they were charismatic. And then like people were be like, it'd be way cooler if we had like some women protagonists or some people of color as protagonists. And then like gamers, because it's a lot of straight white dudes were like, well, why can't you just let the immersion in, even if it's like a white dude? And then those same people, now that there's like characters who are coming out of those different things, are getting real fucking mad now. I can't believe that Horizon Zero Dawn is a female protagonist. Dude, Aloy's a fucking good character, okay? Like that was a fun game. That was my game of the year. Chris and I did an entire playthrough of that shit on our channel. Aloy's a good character. Like as soon as they get like one taken away from them, it's like, no. It reminds me of like Dudley Dursley, right? Where it's like, I only have 46 presents. I had 47 last year. I only have 46 straight white protagonists. Where's my 47th one? Why is there a woman now? And like, dude, I don't know. Fucking like, I think that it's because Alex and I actually had this argument where she thinks that she wishes that every game, and I think that she kind of agreed with me at the end. She thinks that every game should give you sex and race options for your character, like for character creation, like how Mass Effect you can make Shepard whatever you want. And I think that it's fine if it's not going to impact the story that you're trying to tell. But I think that because Shepard actually is kind of like the whole point of Shepard is that you're the one who's driving the story behind Shepard, and the world's created by the characters around him. But if it's being told by your protagonist, if you need to lock them into a sex or gender or a race, I think that you kind of have to let people do that, right? I think that Horizon Zero Dawn is a fantastic game. I think that if Aloy's a dude, I don't think it's as good of a game. And the same way that because Chris and I just finished a playthrough of the Uncharted series, I think that Nathan Drake, I think that the way that they did those characters in the first game was kind of shit, but by the end of the fourth one, they did a really, really good job with those characters. And I don't think that it would have been nearly as good if you could have let Drake go in either direction, because I think he's way weaker of a character if he's a woman. And I think that the relationship he has with Elena specifically doesn't work nearly as well if you let her be a man.
Interesting.
Yeah, so like I think that it's basically I don't think that you need to like force representation or force choice in every game. I think that it's like it should be there if it doesn't impact things. But I don't want to see a loss of creativity because you're locking people into doing a thing. I don't want you to be able to not be able to tell the same story because you have to let people do something else and it doesn't work, right? Life is Strange is a fantastic game. That game does not work if Max is an adult, or if she's a man, or if she's not super socially awkward. Like you need those things. You need her to be like really like anxious all the time. She has to feel threatened at certain points in that story based off of who she is as a person. Like when it's a story-driven game, you have to let the story get told sometimes. And I understood where Alex was coming from. She's like, "Fuck, dude! Like we don't get a lot of women," and I'm like, I don't disagree with you, but like there are certain times like I think that we're moving in the right direction. I don't think we're there yet. I think it's just like if you're like I think that I would like to see closer to equal representation, but I don't think it should be like forced. I just think that culturally we should shift in that direction. I think we're going there. I think we're moving in that direction. I just think that that should take some time. Sorry, I keep on going off on fucking tangents on you. I'm not trying to do that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, like you said before, we don't have a schedule, no like talking points really. It's I think that to sum up a little bit, I think I agree that forcing is usually not a good thing. Now, this is something I've like the whole, once again, as a white male speaking as a white male, the concept of like I think is affirmative action the right word? Where you want to hire as many females as you do males for jobs. So this concept to me, like I kind of my initial perspective was a lot like your initial perspective about how the best person for the job should get the job. One of the important things to remember is that the person making the decision on whether that person gets the job or not is usually a guy.
Well, just because they're the ones in position of power right now, yes.
Yeah, and the thing is, the big question, which I don't know the answer to. I mean, I'd like to think that the answer rests in more equality, but the big question for me is, you know, would the world be maybe a little bit less profit focused and maybe a little bit like I'm gonna just go all with the stereotypes here and be a
Yeah,
little
sure.
bit more because
Well, when you're
whether
talking
it's
about really large groups of people, so like you're not. I don't think anyone's going to, or anybody intelligent is going to think that you're assuming that every individual in these groups is going to be of this way,
yeah
right? If you're going to say that men are more
yeah
profit driven as a group, they probably are.
yeah
I don't think anyone's
and,
going to say, well, that means that this guy's greedy because he's a CEO. Like maybe,
well
like not all of them.
well and maybe and this is kind of my perspective though is that it's not like and I don't know if it's like if it's gender based culture based probably some combination and also probably specific circumstances based as well for whatever large degree but the concept that my wife actually pointed out was what if like if 9 out of 10 of the people like hired for that job you're talking about are men because they are best for the job, what if the job itself is not that great right now because it's being driven by the whatever stereotypical male thing you want to put out there. What if it could be better in some way, and whether it's actually from business results, or what if it's actually from like a better working environment, or maybe the company interacts better with PR because they're doing better things socially, whatever reason, it could be better in some other way as well. And that a lot of the results, a lot of the benchmarks that exist out there right now are based kind of on what men have set to be success, right? Like getting lots of
Mhm.
money, beating out the competition, that kind of thing. I'm not going to even argue whether it's a gender or culture thing. I don't know. I assume that it's probably some of both, as I mentioned, but what it comes down to, though, is that maybe the world that could exist we don't even know about because of the lack of representation of women in like managerial roles, for example.
Mhm.
And so in my mind, my way of thinking about it is that I also don't want to force quotas. I hate the concept of quotas in general. I wish that people were just cared more about getting people who are good for the job. But at the same time, I also wish that we could experiment and figure out what a world would be like
Yes.
with different levels of representation, and then maybe maybe things don't go the way we want to for whatever reason, for whatever group is represented. Maybe it's people who like Battlestar Galactica. If we hire more of those people, maybe the world doesn't go as well. Whatever group it is, maybe they don't do the job in a way that makes things better, and that's fine too. I think at that point we've at least validated it to some degree with a societal experiment. And I know that this is more just brainstorming than anything else. Again, I'm just kind of throwing it out here,
Yeah,
but
sure. No, that's fine. I actually have a decent idea, I think, of how to respond, but I'm ready to finish first.
yeah, and I just think that I don't believe in, how can I say this? I believe that people are inherently equal in the basis that they're humans. I believe that there's a lot that everyone shares with each other. I do believe that people also have different strengths and weaknesses, and that people have different interests, obviously. And there are roles that fit some people better than others. Um, that is irrespective of gender or culture or race or sexuality or anything. I don't really think, like, I personally, once again, I don't give a shit. I really don't. If you are good at the job, I don't care if you're like physically disabled or whatever it did, or whatever race or whatever gender. It does not
Yeah.
matter to me. I don't
Obviously,
care.
barring it being like a physical job, like maybe don't hire the guy in the
well,
wheelchair for the
well,
job
but,
on the
but,
ring. But yeah.
you're right. You're right. And of
Yeah.
course, but
That's
then
obviously kind of a legit reason not to hire that dude.
well, that's what we're doing though. Is I'd like to see a culture where we acknowledge the differences, but still like without because I don't we're not homogenous either. We're not homogenous. I believe that we're equal on the basis that we're all human, but we don't all want the same things. We aren't all good at the same things. We don't all want to be good at the same things, and we don't take joy in the same things. So we should acknowledge, and maybe there is a gender difference. Like I think that probably there is something physiologically that's different.
Yeah, I think that even in like a completely like equalitarian society, you would still see men shift towards certain fields and women towards others. But I don't think it would be this like the
It
engineering
probably
field
wouldn't be
being
as
at
drastic.
90-10, like probably fucking not.
Probably not. Yeah, but I think that we need to acknowledge the differences, but not discriminate based on them. I guess you know what I'm saying. Like
Yep.
because we don't want to deny that there are differences either, because then you're also limiting potential, but in a
Yeah, no,
different way. You
I don't
know.
disagree at all. So, in regards to the affirmative action point that you brought up, I think that in practice, I think that it's something that's really misused often, and I think that in that utopian society I think it'd be fucking ridiculous. But like, I think that in certain cases, it's used to prop up as like a band-aid fix for disenfranchisement in certain cases. So,
Sure.
like, Let's talk about real quick.
So just before, I just want to say that on the basis of like fundamentally giving people equal opportunities, I do agree with affirmative action. Just to be clear on that.
In certain cases, like it has to be 5 men and 5 women, and like fucking no, like you're not gonna have to. Okay, we only have 3 women applicants, so we're gonna have to go out and fucking like force 2 chicks to work here when we have like 17 dudes who want to work. Like that's kind of dumb. Yeah. But like an example that shows up in practice, right, is university is really expensive in the United States. So if you're rich, you can kind of go with shit grades. Yeah. Like if you're going to have to get in. But a lot of people will get acceptance letters and they can't go because they can't afford it if they don't get scholarships, right?
Yeah.
So in the United States, there's a much higher distribution of wealth among white people than black people. So if you're just going to you can make the argument like, well, no, we're just going to take the best people to bring to the school who had the highest grades, and that's how we want to bring it. And I guess that's like, you can kind of make that as a fine argument. But like, let's say that you have your cutoff where there was a white dude who like goes to school. He was raised in a 2-parent household. One parent, only one parent had to work, and he always had like his other parent around helping him out, teaching him everything. He never had to work after school. He never had to do anything, and he has like an 85. And like that's pretty good, I guess. And let's say that you have to choose between giving this kid a scholarship or a black kid who was raised in a single-parent household who didn't have both parents around. His mom wasn't around very often at all because she had to work 2 jobs in order to support him. After school, after he was like 13, he had to start working, and he didn't get to do homework every night. He was late getting to sleep certain nights, and that guy with all those issues gets an 83. Like, yeah, he doesn't have as good of grades, but which of those kids do you think is going to do more with that scholarship? Which of those kids do you think has a higher potential to do good with that education? Like, probably the one who did almost as well and had way less things behind him. I think that's somewhere where affirmative action kind of comes in handy, right? You have certain people who have a potential to do better but are disenfranchised, and you're helping them out in that way, right? Like now, obviously, like I would say that you'd be better off being like, well, instead of saying like we're gonna break these down by race, you do it by the actual underlying issues, right?
Yes.
And black people don't need money; it's poor people. But like, yeah, we kind of need like culturally. I think you would get if you have 2 people who are equal, but one's black and one's white, and you're helping out, you are still going to see a bigger net benefit for society by having a black person get that role, because then you're getting a little bit more opportunity for role models, right? Or people in the future, like, okay, maybe I can be that. Like there's underlying other effects that could come in. Like, okay, we have both these guys are poor. We might get more good a generation or 2 down the line if the next Bill Nye is a black dude. Or sorry, the next Neil deGrasse. You know what? Neil deGrasse Tyson. Right. Well, like, like, how do you think that it's possible that there's probably some guys who worked a little bit harder after school because they saw Neil deGrasse Tyson and they're like, I want to do science and I can do it because other dudes who like me did that, as opposed to like Bill Nye and I was gonna say Jill Nye, but actually having a woman in that position would be pretty good too. But like, you know what I mean, right? Like there are certain aspects that kind of come in where like this can be really beneficial, having different figures that are prominent in different positions, right?
And I never really considered. Sorry, I just want to say I never really considered that. Like having role models, aspirational figures to look up to. That probably does make a difference.
Yes, it does. There's been a study on this, and with your girl Scully.
Oh yeah.
You ever hear about the Scully effect?
No.
Okay, so I don't even remember because I've never watched X-Files, but what exactly is her job?
She works at the FBI, the FBI. Yeah. So she's like a special investigator with the FBI.
Yes. So after X-Files came out, that's like she's a prominent woman role model who like is actually well written as a character, from my understanding. Right? It's not just like I'm a woman. Everybody, look at the woman things I do.
Oh no. She needed to compete in a man's world at that time, so she did.
Yeah.
And she did a kick-ass job. Anyway.
After that show came out, there was a really big increase in interest of women trying to go into law enforcement because of her. I couldn't remember what the field was. I just remember she was. I'm just reading about it right now. She was acting as a forensic pathologist. Right, in forensics, actually, it was forensics, and you know what? That's what my fucking fiance took her degree in. So I should have remembered that one.
Scully effect.
Yep, Scully effect. I don't actually know if she ever watched. I'm sorry, I shouldn't misquote. That's not what her degree was in. That was what her minor was in. She went to an art school because school was hard. It was expensive. So she went to an art school. So her degree was in English with or in arts. I'm sorry, not in English. My sister was in English. They went to the same school because your degree was either in arts or in English. Her degree was in arts with a minor in forensic anthropology.
Ooh, that's cool.
And when I went to visit her, and that like her 4th year class had like 7 people in it, and like 3 of them were chicks. So I don't, maybe without Dana Scully, maybe she's the only chick there. Maybe she's not there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's fair. That is a reasonable thing to think about. I think for me, when it comes to giving things based on merit, in my opinion, it's like it really should be. And I know
Yeah, you have to look at these other factors. Basically, what I'm saying, right? Like you give the merit of like, well, this guy scored better on these tests than this guy, but like if this guy had to work way harder to get there, I know I'm using it obviously really broad when I'm saying tests.
Yeah, but tests are woefully inadequate, as we both know, about talking, like describing a person in any detail, really.
I'm not talking about necessarily just written tests, right? But like any sort of testing, like any data that you have on a person, you have to look at the factors around them. Basically the same thing we've been saying the whole time.
Yeah.
And real quick, I don't want to shift off it too much, so maybe just write that point down because it was a second point that was really related. Because obviously when we were saying that like being like straight white dudes like the default and easy, that's not to say, because I've gotten to see this, and you were saying like maybe with women, if we talk women representation, like things would be a little bit different. There are still fields where it is disadvantageous to be a man. There's just like way less of them. So like
that's true. Yeah.
And I know this from personal experience because there's like two off the top of my head. There's massage therapy because fucking nobody wants to get massaged by a dude because men get really creeped out and women feel more comfortable with other women because they're like, oh, I don't want this to turn into a sexual thing. And guys are like, I don't want this to turn into a sexual thing. So like, because I've talked about this with my massage therapist and like, you look at the booking schedule and like the dudes are like always struggling to get people, and every time someone's like, oh, I don't have a preference, they always get booked as a dude. It's like if somebody's signing up for or somebody like queuing up for a game of League of Legends and they put Phil, they're gonna get support every time because nobody fucking wants to play support. And the other field is the service industry, which is the one that I work in. I have certain disadvantages because of my sex and gender based off of it. Now, I don't really consider myself to be particularly disenfranchised because I'm very good at my job and I do better than a fair amount of the women that I work with and some of the dudes. Arguably, actually in certain cases you could make the argument against all of them, but maybe I'm being a little bit arrogant there. But like I'm an over average server, and there's like almost 20 chicks who work with us, and I think there's 5 guys now, and that's like way up. Like we've just hit a plus surplus. When I started there was 1. And then when I started letting me serve, it was 2 of us. But there are certain difficulties that you run into in this field as a man because societally, most of the time it's men paying bills. And I can say this as an expert in the field because I've handled out a lot of bills. Even if it's a couple that's sharing income, the guy's usually the one that's paying. So guys will tip better to pretty girls. Guys will also tip better to friendly girls. I don't really have access to either of these options. So I usually have to try to figure out different ways to get the same amount of money out of people, right? Usually if they're there as a couple, I'll, appeal to the woman, not like in a sexual way, but like, I'll usually get her in a good mood, and then that will in return, like I try to do that really early, and then I'll work on him later, because if she's been in a good mood the entire time, he is inherently now in a better mood. He finds me to be a little more charming. If I do things at his expense, it's usually very early on, and like usually very much so that like she's enjoying it and not in a way that makes him actually look bad, right? It'll be like I'll make jokes about, I'll make jokes about like the roles of couples and gender in relationships a lot, which is funny to the woman. She's like, he understands what it's like, but also the guy's like, he understands what it's like to be me. And then, everybody comes out feeling really good about it. And then also like, that's how I get my money. Whereas, if you're a hot lady, it's not as hard to get that same tip out of that guy because you just have to be a hot lady. Which is like, but in the industry that I work in, yeah, it's like it's advantageous to be a woman. It's just that there's not nearly as many of them. So when we make general statements like it's easier to be a dude, like it's not in every case, obviously. And most of our management team are women. I'm sure I think now we've got one male manager, one male supervisor, and this is the highest representation of men. We've never before this had more than one man in management. No, I'm sorry, we did have one other period where they overlap. We've never had more than 2 men in a management position. And it's never been more than like 40%. We've never had a majority of men in the workplace, and it tends to work out better that way because the men that we do have are pretty highly qualified, but like they tend to be exceptions rather than the rule in the restaurant industry, because when people want to complain to a manager, they really don't want to talk to a dude very often. They don't come across nearly as sympathetic when they it's just not nearly as well received. So yeah, like, that was kind of the big one. It was make sure that people understood that when I said that, like, because someone's gonna be like, well, I feel, like somebody who's a man or who's a male server who isn't having nearly as good of a time in it because they don't have quite as much charm or panache as I do, will who will, if I just make the statement like it's easier to be a man in the workplace than a woman, well, they'll take umbrage with that because as an individual, that may not be true for them. Because
I appreciate the fact that you're covering both sides here.
Well, it's important to do, right? Because like if you just make because people as a when you make broad statements about a class, they don't always apply to every individual in that class, right? When people try to make an appeal that that you have a certain advantage, like that certain classes have advantages and individuals in that class don't have those advantages, they usually resent it a lot. And I understand why, right? Like when Black Lives Matter doesn't always have a great message at all times when they're like, white people need to back up and help us all out, because like poor white dudes don't really see the picture the same way. And I understand it, because for them that's like, you can't be like, well, no, your life's really easy though because you're white though, and they're like, no, my life's hard though because of other reasons. They're not necessarily going to see things the same way, and like understandably so. So it's important to acknowledge those both sides. But like, yeah, when you're talking about most stuff, because the only two fields I can think of where it's better to be a woman than a man is massage therapy and serving, and the service industry is not a high skilled job. So it's true. Like, oh, like, you know what, you could just go work retail and make almost as much money. And then massage therapy actually takes. I should differentiate. There's a difference between a masseuse and a massage therapist. One goes to school and doesn't do weird sex things, because that's really important. Don't go into a massage therapist and think that you're getting a handy. It's not going to happen. And that's important, dude. Some people's only interaction with that area is like, oh, I've seen the porns though, so I know what's going to go on here. And then they walk in, and it's like, oh, this is very different than what I was expecting. I think
handies aside,
a great transition.
The thing that I wanted to just point out, which is not exactly related, but I think that in an ideal society, once again, when you're talking about merit-based anything, I think that ideally you would have like a profile of the person. And I know that sounds very big brothery, but what I basically mean is that if you truly want to assess if someone is a good worker, if they are, intelligent in more ways than just, related to school specifically, and of course, even related to school, even if they don't necessarily score well, there may be some other reason why they're a good pick for whatever, whether it's a job or school or whatever, then it would be good to actually have like an individual profile, like, what are your struggles and whatnot, like a personal interview or something to help break that down. I think that would be something better than how it's currently done, with the exception of the fact that I know it takes a lot more time and a lot more investment by the recruiters, whoever they are, and the person may not be very good about speaking about themselves.
Yeah, that's either. The problem. I think I don't think a lot of people are aware of the advantages and struggles that they have. Right? I didn't realize how this shit works until really recently. Like, and just, like, I've had to speak with a lot of people who I don't think this would work for. Right? I ended up turning into like kind of a trolley conversation, because one, it was with somebody who's incredibly intellectually dishonest, and two, it was through Facebook posts. So it was really hard to get any interest out of them. But Alex occasionally posts like semi-controversial opinions about things. A lot of it tends to be feminist, but also like she advocates for low skill workers having a better quality of life, which I think is fair. And she had a post that was saying basically that nobody should have to work more than 40 hours a week to support to be able to fulfill the cost of living. And there was a guy who like argues like nobody does, and like, no, that's not true actually. Minimum wage for 40 hours a week will not get you everything you need. It's like, no, you just need to stop cutting. You need to not spend your money so frivolously. It's like, okay, you understand that like if people have kids, they have to be able to support them, right? Well, then they can go do other things. No, you don't have things. Well, they shouldn't have had the kids. Like, this was somebody who was
really fair point, really, but
yeah, because everyone has kids on purpose, right? Every time. Yeah. And I couldn't get the guy to be honest at all. This is a guy who's from a fucking Alex's hometown it's a town of like 15,000 people, and 5,000 of them work directly for the military. So that's a pretty big population. He's like, oh, they can just join the military. One, not everybody can do that. Two, that's not a career, that's a lifestyle.
That's true.
So if you don't want to join it, that's not just like, well, you should just tough it out because you can. But I wasn't going to make that argument, because like he'll just, give a feels argument like, well, no, it's great. Yeah, you should man up. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to win that. I'm not going to win him over to the side. I was trying like really hard to make him understand the things. And this was somebody who like refused to acknowledge that not everybody has this. He thought that privilege doesn't exist. And I was like, all right, dude, like, you understand that, like, because I asked Alex for a little bit of background information about him. I thought that was fair to do. And this is like a straight white dude who had his dad pay. He's like relatively like decent, not like he's relatively high up in the military for his age. He's got a trade in it that, he's like a specialist. He's doing very well for himself. But this was somebody who lived with his dad until he was like 25 because he could. And it's like, not everybody has that opportunity. Like if you make a mistake when you're living on your own and you don't have your parents to fall back on, that mistake is a lot more costly, right? Like, not to get too big into personal examples, but like if I was to make a mistake when I was at 23, it would have had a lot less of an impact on me than if somebody like Ryan did it, right? And Ryan's not even in like a terrible situation, but like mine was better off. I had two parents who loved me, who I could fall back on if anything happened. And I was basically being raised without judgment on a personal level. Like obviously they were judging my actions as parents, but like they were pretty much going to love me no matter what, unless I was like a serial killer. Right. So, the fact that I had those things, if I made a mistake, it wasn't going to be nearly as punishing. Whereas if somebody, who's sometimes, and there's certain mistakes that if you make them, you're just like, they're going to impact the rest of your life. If you have a kid and you're not ready to have a kid, that is going to impact you for the rest of your life. If you marry a girl when you're a little bit too young and then you don't have someone there to be like, hey, maybe don't do that, idiot. And then you lose half of your money. That can be really detrimental. If you end up getting a criminal record for something that you do really stupid once, that you genuinely change as a person, well, that doesn't show up on. We don't do tests to be like, oh, you're reformed, so now we took away your criminal record, and now it's really easy to get jobs for you again. Like, these are things that people will respond or react in predictable ways. And even beyond that, not everybody starts off with the same fucking baseline of stuff, right? Some people have to get jobs after school. The example I was using, some people have to get jobs after school to feed themselves. Those people don't have equal access to education because they don't have, I can study after school now. Like I got a job in high school because I wanted to buy shit. And my parents thought it was a valuable lesson to make me start spending money of my own. And I did learn a lot from doing that. But if my grades started getting worse, I could have stopped working to focus on studying. Whereas if I can do that because like, he's not going to get to learn that lesson, but he's learning these other lessons. If somebody's like, yeah, but you have to keep working because otherwise we can't eat this week. That's a really different situation. And I super couldn't get this guy to admit that. And he was being super disingenuous because he was trying to like, you want to talk about a manipulation of data. This was somebody who's like, when I started in the military, I made less money than minimum wage. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. But even if you did, like you were living in the shacks, right? Because you live on base. So what the actual truth was is they get paid minimum wage, but they get docked part of their pay for their cost of living before they get the money. So when you live in the shacks and you have a meal plan, they charge it to you before they give you your money. So that's not the same thing as not making minimum wage at all. That's a total fucking lie, but whatever. And I was like, okay, so what were you making? And I was like, well, what was the cost of living? Like, what did they charge you to live in the shacks? He's like, well, my apartment right now, it costs me this much. I don't give a fuck what it costs you right now. You said do you make more than minimum wage now? Because that's completely like not at all. Like, of course you're going to make numbers look better when you're taking the worst point of what you were paid and you're showing the most expensive version. Like, well, this is what the cost of living was when I was in the shacks. My rent at my apartment now and the cost of groceries every month. Well, no, if they're taking money from you, you don't have to pay for either of those things. So that's not what I asked you. If it's not compared to your current salary, idiot. And then eventually it just turned into like he was ad homing the fuck out of me, dude. Because he tried to defeat my argument with his like, well, you're privileged and I'm doing better than you. And I was like, well, one, like financially, I guess you're doing better than me. But this is like one of those guys who like posts about how like the gamer shit we were talking about with like women who like women don't treat men well and like the friend zone's a real thing and like that's a really big problem that we need to address. And I was like, not really though. This is somebody who thinks that those are real issues. And he can't talk to women, but like, hey, he makes more money than I do. So, I guess that's better off, even though, I could be in school right now, but I was like, hey, I've got a pretty good relationship going on right now. And I work a job that lets me make full-time money for part-time hours. And then I get to focus on a hobby, which gives me happiness. I get to focus on my relationship, which gives me happiness. I get personal fulfillment. But then also like, he was like, well, you had privilege too. Cause I did. I had a really easy life growing up, dude. My parents both loved me. They were together until I was an adult, so I didn't have the issues of like, divorced parents back and forth. And I was 20 when they split up, so like, we were past the point where that shit mattered. I had the fucking easiest but like just because I had all those opportunities doesn't mean that I'm not right when I'm making my points. Like just because I had access to opportunity doesn't mean that everybody does, because that was never my point, was that I need more than minimum wage. I don't need more than minimum wage. I just have it because I'm good at my job.
And I think that's one of the, I don't really know what to call it. Okay. So for people who brought themselves up by their bootstraps, as this guy obviously did, without any help from anybody, right?
Yeah, not his dad.
But the thing is, even if and okay, so once again, in an ideal world, I don't think there'd be a government because we just get along and we'd like we'd learn everything we need to know and everything would be like
Hell yeah, dude.
cheap
We
and
just have like town
streamlined.
council meetings, but nobody would be in charge. It would just be an open forum, and everyone would never talk over each other.
Well, I mean, I don't even need to be that utopian. I just need it to be to the point where we can just like agree when we agree to disagree, agree that we're not always right, and agree that there are certain things that need to be done no matter what.
Mhm.
But anyways, I just to pull out from that. So the thing is, when it comes to people who pulled them up from their boots by their own bootstraps. Okay, so when he went to school, did he go to a public school? If he went to anything other than a private school, an exclusively private school, then yes, he went to a public school. Doesn't matter if it was Catholic or public school, it was funded by public money mostly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even if it was a private school, he was getting, it's one of his parents was paying for that shit. Like either way, he's still getting.
Well, it's true, but I'm even talking about like from the government perspective. I mean, like even his parents one thing, but and his parents would have benefited in some way from having roads to go to work. They would have benefited in some way from not dying or going crazy from the lead and leaded fuel when leaded fuel was still a thing. These people who are so upset about regulations now aren't upset to have clean drinking water. Yeah. They're not upset to have for their kids to grow up in a world where there aren't people smoking around them in restaurants all the time, giving them cancer over time. And I'm not saying the government's the right way to do this necessarily, but what I'm saying is
the no smoking section was totally. That there was like that magical barrier where the smoke couldn't get in the non-smoking section. That was never an issue.
I do remember that.
Yeah. Why did we ever take out those magical barriers?
I don't know. We didn't want to feel the magic anymore. It's the red magic's been ruined. But like or that that they didn't die in their young teens or their early 20s because they had seatbelts in their cars after how many years of not having them. And once again, I'm not saying that government is good necessarily or that this couldn't have happened without government. What I'm saying is that because of a collective will to make things safer, to make things better in some way, even at the cost of money, these people had help right from the beginning.
Yeah, well, that's the reason we're okay with paying taxes is because we get benefits from that shit.
Well, why we're okay with paying taxes, but not everybody is. And once again, I don't think the government is necessarily the right person or the right group to be delivering all this stuff. But so far, they're the best we've got. There's not been a more successful, as far as I know, institution that's been able to provision all the services that governments can do or that governments do without having some other profit motive or something that causes the quality to go down or the availability to go down, whatever. So for me, it's like these people, and to go beyond that with the parents and all that too, nobody makes it on their own. If you talk about making it in society, there's no such thing. And the fact that he's in the military, I mean, he's literally being paid by me and you and everybody else, for him to say that, this person should just change their life. Well, sometimes if you don't have the right situation around you, it's much, much more difficult to do that.
Yeah. People respond in predictable ways, right? Like,
and sometimes they surprise. And I mean, I have a lot of respect for people who do that, but I don't necessarily look down on people who had a really tough go and don't become CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You know what I'm saying?
Right, exactly. I 100% agree with you. So I think that the biggest issue that people run into is that they're unaware. Cognitive bias is a wonderful thing. You ask somebody why, you ask somebody in the States why the Muslim guys over picking up welfare. Oh, it's because, or Mexican, they don't like, a lot of them don't like them. Oh, it's because he's late. I don't know. Schrodinger's immigrants like my favorite thing too, right? Mexicans are simultaneously collecting welfare and stealing all of our jobs. This one isn't my dude, but like they see a Mexican guy drive up to pick up a welfare check from an SUV or from a DMV. SUV is not a thing, right? From a DMV, and it's like okay, like or not a DMV, but like you know what I mean, right? It's like oh, it's because he's lazy. It's because he's not trying to work. I saw this one time where this guy was just collecting welfare checks and abusing the system. He had totally had enough money. He was working at the table. It was bullshit. But like you already believe this, so of course you're going to remember like the 2 times that you see it, not the 70 people who also drove up who needed that shit to feed their kids. And then they're really willing to they're completely uncharitable towards other people when it comes to their shortcomings, but they are completely unwilling to give away any of their successes, right? if they end up on welfare, it's not because they're lazy. It's because they got really unlucky and something bad happened, and they're really hard workers. They just need a little bit of help right now. So it's okay that they get welfare, right? Because fuck, man, they just need a little bit of help to get back on their feet. And when it comes to their success, well, of course, it was all me who did all of this. I went to school
both ways
by my parents. I did all this studying because I didn't have to work after school, and my parents paid for a private tutor. Like, you had help. It's fine to admit it, dude. Like, fuck, and like, I don't like. It's just be aware that not everybody has access to that shit, and like sometimes maybe like when you're in a position of power because of things that you were helped with, maybe like help out a bit, right? Like if somebody's like having a rough go of it, and it's like this is a reasonable reason why they're having a rough go of it, like fucking help a brother out a little bit, right? Like
I think
when somebody made a mistake that's fucking with them 10 years down the road, like if they just need like a little bit to get themselves back over that edge, like fucking help them out of it. You have to be aware of the. Sorry, go ahead. I've cut you off like 3 times.
Oh no! I've tried to cut you off like 3 times apparently. Sorry about that. It's just
it's okay.
I feel like it's the word that a lot of people would use is like a failure of empathy, but I think it's more just a failure of compassion because I mean you need empathy to understand the situation that they're in, but you need compassion to care. You know.
Yeah.
And so
I try to stay away from appeals to.
But
emotion though when I'm arguing with these kind of people because they're never going to go for that, right? Like,
no, of course, but I think all you need to point out is that they went on government funded roads, they went to school in government funded schools, they are currently working for the government, so a whole bunch of people have helped them out, not even counting whatever their family did for them, and their family apparently helped them out quite a bit. You know, being able to stay home till you're 25, as you mentioned.
The kind of person who like when you like, he's just like, well, I mean, they're just choosing not to be better, and I'm like, that's not as easy for everybody to make right choices, right? When people choose crime, like, yeah, stealing is bad, but like, rich people don't steal because they don't have to. Like, when you're stealing because the reason's like, well, I committed a crime because I needed bread, I was really hungry, and I stole this guy's DS because I was going to be able to sell that and buy 5 days worth of sandwiches for my family. Like, I feel really shitty for that kid who got his DS stolen at gunpoint, but I also feel like maybe we could have avoided this if we'd like not fucked a guy to the point where he didn't have enough money to pay for food, and he doesn't have the opportunity to work because he got picked up after school one day and now he can't get a job anywhere. Like, maybe think about these things.
There are some people who would argue that he just has a bad disposition and he should really like become a better person.
Yeah, you know, like because of genetics, Shane, race realism exists, but
not even genetics. Just some people are off in a bad way. You know, like what are you going to do for
this? This is the kind of person who, like, when they're doing like a card game, like when they're playing like Hearthstone or like Pokemon cards or anything, like they'll make the argument that's like, okay, I'm going to lose in this turn if I don't draw the 1 card I need, and there's 30 cards left in the deck, and you're like, well, what are the odds that you draw that card? And a normal person would be like, it's 1 in 30. You're probably fucked. And this person would be like, it's 50-50. You're either going to draw the card or you're not. You're like, yep, that's how math works, idiot. That's how that's you just fucking crush statistics. It's 50-50. Because that's what they're saying, though, right? Like, they're either choosing to do the crime or they're not.
Right.
Not necessarily. Right. They're either choosing to be poor or they're not.
That's actually not necessarily. It's actually a really interesting way of looking at it. I never thought about it.
I actually got like, I'm totally like ripping that from a streamer who like used that point of view, but like I think it's kind of fitting. Like,
I do. I really appreciate that. It kind of speaks to like even just greater than empathy, compassion, whatever. It's like a very simplistic worldview in a way, right? Like it's not even acknowledging that there's a more complex world beyond the one that they've seen themselves, basically.
Yeah, like I love when they use their anecdotes to like argue against data, and it's like your anecdotes are worthless because 1, that's not a big enough sample size to say anything, or not big enough, but like that's not an accurate sample size because it's small, which on its own, like sometimes you can have small sample sizes that work if the distribution is proper, but from your buttfuck town in the middle of nowhere that nobody in New Brunswick takes seriously, you know, New Brunswick, the province that nobody in Canada takes seriously. Like, dude, I live in the biggest city in New Brunswick, and like, I know that everyone makes fun of us because we're like bullshit New Brunswick. Like, who gives a fuck? We're just like East Quebec. But like, fuck, dude, this is like the town that everyone here makes fun of for being a tiny town. Like, you think maybe you don't have an accurate representation of things on a global scale. Yeah, because you're in the city that nobody cares about, in the province that nobody cares about, in the country that the United States doesn't care about, the United States that's the most culturally influential country in the world. Maybe you don't have an accurate representation of like what people should be doing in all of North America based off of like, well, this is what things are like in Oromocto, New Brunswick, you fucking idiot. Just to like kind of highlight the end of that, like after like he was getting condescending and ad homs and really disingenuous with arguments, so I just started like kind of like memeing at him, and eventually he deleted the entire conversation because I might have got a little bit mean, but like once I got him to like admit that he was a sociopath, so I did admit because like I was like, do you not understand? Like I tried to like the appeal to empathy, like do you understand how this could be different for these people? And he's like, I know, and I'm like, okay, well if you can't do that, then you're kind of a sociopath, dude. He's like, no, and I'm like, well, you can't accept that things are different for different kinds of people, so you're a sociopath. And then when he argued against me, I threw that Neil deGrasse Tyson meme that's like we're hitting autism levels that shouldn't even be possible. And then suddenly the guy who thinks that like words can't hurt people got really offended because I made fun of people with a serious disease. I was like, first of all, autism, like depending on who it is, like that's people overcome that shit all the time. It's not nearly as bad as it used to be. Like high functioning, obviously, right? Like it's difficult people. Second of all, it was just a meme, and words can't hurt people. And like, yeah, like I'm not a total idiot for the record. Like if somebody like actually has disability, I'm not gonna like flaunt it in their face. But for a straight white dude who words can't hurt, I figured like, well, the gloves are off. Let's just throw these ones in there. And then he got really mad and deleted the entire thread. And I was like, well, I think that means that I won the argument. I felt kind of bad because I like resorted to debate trickery at the end, but like one, I tried really hard to be nice at the start, and two, like I just fuck that dude. He was a dick.
I think when it comes down to it, though, like you've won when either they delete the conversation or they block you. Like when it's not.
Well, we weren't Facebook friends. He was one of Alex's. She ended up deleting him afterwards, and I was kind of bummed because I wanted to like. That was like one of those cases where, like I kind of need the low hanging fruit every once in a while. It just feels really good to just like shit on somebody who like just every once in a while you just need that, like I admit it's a total ego thing. Like I want to talk to smart people because I want to learn shit. Like this, I enjoyed this conversation more than I enjoying talking with shitters that I work with. But like sometimes it feels really good when they get to say something stupid and I get to be like, nah. And yeah, I'll fucking use every trick in the book just to kind of mess with them a bit because I don't respect a lot of the people that I see in my day-to-day life. I'm not talking about like people in general that like these specific people that I see in my day-to-day life. Like so yeah, like when someone made the argument like, oh well, I keep opening the fire exit door and letting people in. We don't let there's not an alarm for it, but like we don't let people come in that direction because it's nowhere near the hostess stand and people are going to go sit themselves. And I'm like, don't let people in that door. It's locked for a reason. She's like, well, I've always done it. Well, that's a really dumb argument, actually, idiot. So I kind of may have strawmanned her a little bit and said, just because we've always done something doesn't make that a good argument. She's like, yes, it does. And I'm like, well, we used to have slaves, so do you think slavery is okay? Probably she doesn't think slavery is okay, but it shut her up, and I didn't have time to have an argument because this was in the middle of a shift, and it was like a Friday evening supper shift. I wasn't having that argument any longer than the time it took me to ring in the order I was ringing in, and I didn't want to open the door again, so it worked. It was effective. I didn't have a goal of finding like ideological truth. I had a goal of this girl has to stop opening this fucking door.
But you know what though? I wouldn't say that it was really a straw man or even disingenuous.
No, I followed the logic of her, because I followed the logic of her. Yeah. I did the same thing with the fucking. Okay, this happened, and people call it a straw man too in this Discord server I'm in because they tend to be fairly right leaning, ideological thought. There was a guy who is Silver 5, which is like not very high up in the rating scale, and he's boosted to that. He's not actually a good enough player to be a Silver 5 player, and he decided because he has the account information of another guy in the server who's like Bronze 3, and this was a guy who was like Bronze 5 forever and worked really, really hard to get to Bronze 3, and he's like, I'm going to boost him to Silver 5 without telling him, which I was like, that's not okay. And then also this guy sucks, so he lost a bunch of games and knocked him back down to like Bronze 4, like almost Bronze 5, and I was like, that's kind of like you're displaying rapist tendencies there because you don't seem to think that someone's consent is important. And then everyone got really mad. And I'm like, it's sort of true though, because like one, you fucked up really badly because you don't know that you're not good enough to do the thing you're trying to do. But two, like it would be wrong if I did that. I'm like way better than that shit. I'm in the top like 8% of players in North America. I'm in platinum. I'm not trying to circle jerk myself here, but like I could very easily go on this dude's account and fucking boost him way past where this other guy was going to do it with guaranteed results. Because it's like, do you think that Sidney Crosby could score goals against 6-year-olds? Like, yeah, it's gonna happen.
Wow, you've heard it here. Kyle Snow is the Sidney Crosby among 6-year-olds at the league, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. But like, I was like, it would still be wrong if I did that because having his consent is really important. Because one, putting him behind where he is a shitty thing to do. But two, maybe he's somebody who wants to get to that rank on his own merit, and he's going to feel kind of annoyed when he gets that taken away from him. Like the victory is going to be cheapened when he's just there and he knows he didn't earn it. Like humans. Yeah. That was kind of Yeah, we've kind of started going off into memes now, but that was.
Yeah.
Do you have any other topics that you like super want to go into, or?
No, I think I'm okay. My puppy is up here because I think she doesn't want to be inside anymore. So I think I should probably consider calling it a night here.
Yeah, we went to a lot of places today, so I think it's okay.
Many places, possibly some places that'll make me not get a job, but that's okay.
No, I think that everything that we said was like okay in context, and like
Well,
I think that if anyone actually asked you questions, I think you could defend those positions reasonably.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm like,
Also, nobody watched our shit, so we're good.
we're good. Oh man. All right. Well, on that note, it has been a pleasure as always.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Thanks for joining me for drinks and discussions, Shane. Oh wait, we didn't get any memes for this one. Mammals!